Hey guys, tonight we begin with something truly monumental. A force of nature so vast, so ancient, and so utterly powerful that it makes our everyday concerns feel like a whisper in a hurricane. We're talking about volcanoes. Not the pretty postcards, not the science fair models that bubble with baking soda, but the real deal. The Earth's fiery heart, capable of building continents and, in a single, terrifying breath, wiping entire civilizations off the map. Forget everything you think you know about mountains. These aren't just geological formations. They're living, breathing entities. They rumble, they hiss, they breathe fire and ash, and then sometimes they go quiet, too quiet, a silence that often precedes a cataclysm beyond human imagining. It's an untamed, primal power, a direct link to the molten core of our planet, reminding us just how thin the crust really is beneath our feet. For millennia, humanity has lived in the shadow of these giants. We've built our homes on their fertile slopes, drawn water from their springs, and worshipped them as angry gods or benevolent creators. We've feared them, studied them, and often utterly underestimated them. Because a volcano isn't just a mountain. It's a dynamic, unpredictable force that shapes landscapes, alters climates, and fundamentally rewrites history. Tonight, we're going to pull back the layers of ash and legend to tell the complete story. From the almost mythical eruptions that inspired ancient fears and birthed new lands, to the cataclysmic events that plunged continents into darkness and led to years without a summer. We'll explore the science behind their terrifying beauty, the human stories of survival and loss, and the incredible ways these fiery behemoths have shaped our world, from its very beginning right up to the modern day. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment, maybe dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan for that soft background that always helps ease us into our journey together. And if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and you want to keep exploring the bizarre, beautiful, and often terrifying corners of history with me, then please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going to delve into the very heart of the Earth, a place of immense pressure and unimaginable heat, where rock melts and gases churn, waiting for their moment to burst forth. This isn't just about rocks and lava. It's about the raw, untamed spirit of our planet, a spirit that has shaped every aspect of human civilization, often without us even realizing it. We'll uncover how these magnificent, terrifying natural wonders are born, how they function, and the subtle, yet profound, signs they give us before they unleash their fury. Because, let's be honest, we live on a planet that's very much alive. And just like any living thing, it breathes, it shifts, and sometimes it lets out a very, very loud roar. A roar that echoes through the ages, leaving behind a legacy of destruction, rebirth, and a whole lot of really fascinating history. So prepare yourself. We're about to witness some of the most dramatic moments our planet has ever produced. Not in a textbook, not in a dry lecture, but as a story. A very, very long story, stretching back to a time when humanity first stared up at a smoking peak and understood deep in their bones that they were witnessing a god. And sometimes that god was very, very angry. We'll talk about the subtle changes in the Earth's crust, the slow build-up of pressure, the telltale signs that ancient peoples often misinterpreted as divine displeasure. How a slight tremor, a wisp of smoke, or an odd smell in the air could be the prelude to an event that would change the course of an entire region or even the world. It's a dance between geology and humanity, a constant negotiation for space on a planet that has its own agenda. And trust me, the Earth usually wins that negotiation, often in the most spectacular and devastating ways possible. This journey will take us through fire and ice, through ash-choked skies and seas turned to boiling cauldrons. We'll explore forgotten islands, ancient cities swallowed whole, and modern metropolises that live on borrowed time. Every rumble, every tremor, every glowing plume of smoke tells a story. And tonight, we're listening to every single one. Because understanding these giants of the Earth isn't just about history. It's about understanding the very ground beneath our feet and the immense, beautiful, and terrifying power that lies just beyond our grasp. So relax, or at least try to, because the complete story of history's most devastating volcanic eruptions is about to unfold one rumble at a time. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single earth-shaking detail. All right, so we've established that volcanoes are these magnificent, terrifying giants, right? They're Earth's way of reminding us who's really in charge. But what exactly is that rumbling? What's going on down there that causes a mountain to, well, explode with such dramatic flair? Let's peel back a few layers of our planet. Not just the metaphorical ones, but the actual geological ones to get a better idea. Picture our Earth. It's not a solid ball all the way through, like a gigantic billiard ball. Oh no, underneath our relatively thin habitable surface, it's a cosmic pressure cooker, right at the very center. You've got the core, super hot, dense, and mostly iron. Above that is the mantle, a thick, gooey layer of rock that's so hot it flows, incredibly slowly, like super thick molten caramel. And then, finally, right on top, is our home, the crust. It's comparatively thin, brittle, and frankly, a bit like the skin on a giant, perpetually simmering stew. Now, all that heat and pressure down the mantle has to go somewhere, doesn't it? It's not content to just sit there and simmer quietly forever. Sometimes that superheated, semi-molten rock, which we call magma when it's still underground, finds weaknesses. Cracks, fissures, ancient fault lines in our Earth's crust. And like a particularly stubborn bubble in a thick pot of soup, it starts to push its way upwards. That's the rumbling you hear. It's the planet clearing its throat, so to speak, before it starts to sing a very loud, very fiery song. So, where do these cracks come from? Well, our Earth's crust isn't one solid piece, like the shell of an egg. It's actually broken up into several massive, interlocking pieces called tectonic plates. And these plates? They're not sitting still. Oh no, they're constantly, imperceptibly grinding, sliding, and bumping into each other, carried along by those slow-motion currents in the gooey mantle beneath them. It's like a giant, cosmic jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces are constantly shifting ever so slightly. Most of the world volcanoes, the ones that make the big headlines, form right along the edges of these plates. Where plates pull apart, like at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, magma rises up to fill the gap, creating new seafloor and, eventually, underwater volcanoes, where they collide, like along the Pacific's notorious Ring of Fire. One plate often gets forced underneath another, deep into the hot mantle. The rock melts, and that new, superheated magma then finds a path upward, punching through the overriding plate to form those classic, explosive volcanoes we all know and fear. Think Mount St. Helens or Krakatoa, or even the ones that buried Pompeii. But sometimes you get a volcano popping up seemingly out of nowhere, right in the middle of the plate, far from any boundary. Think Hawaii. These are what we call hot spots. Imagine a super hot plume of magma, almost like a stationary torch, burning its way up through the mantle and crust. As the tectonic plate slowly drifts over this hot spot, it creates a chain of volcanoes, one after another, like a conveyor belt of fiery mountains. The older ones become dormant or extinct as they move away from the heat source, while new ones pop up over the hot spot itself. It's a pretty clever system, if you think about it. Now, for an eruption to happen, it's not just about magma finding a way up. That magma also contains a lot of dissolved gases, like water vapor, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. Think of it like a bottle of soda. When it's sealed, the gas stays dissolved. But shake it up or uncork it, and that pressure gets released. As magma rises closer to the surface, the pressure on it decreases, and those dissolved gases start to expand rapidly. This expansion is a real engine of an eruption, literally pushing and blasting the magma out, often with incredible force. And how that magma, or lava once it hits the surface, behaves really dictates the style of an eruption. If the magma is thin and runny, like warm honey, the gases can escape fairly easily, leading to more gentle, effusive eruptions where lava flows out in rivers, like what you often see in Hawaii. They're still incredibly destructive, mind you, but less immediately explosive. But if the magma is thick, sticky, and gooey, like cold molasses, those gases get trapped. They can't escape easily. The pressure builds and builds and builds until finally it erupts in a violent, cataclysmic explosion, blasting ash, rock, and gas high into the atmosphere. Think Mount Vesuvius. So, when we hear about a volcano rumbling or see steam rising from a summit, it's not just a pretty picture. It's our planet breathing, expanding, and sometimes hinting at something far more dramatic to come. It's a complex, fiery dance happening constantly beneath our feet. And understanding these fundamental basics is the first step to truly appreciating the raw, terrifying, and utterly magnificent power of Earth's volcanoes. Because next up, we're going to dive into exactly what that looks like when the Earth truly unleashes its fury in all its gentle or not-so-gentle forms. You know, when most of us picture a volcanic eruption, our minds probably go straight to the Hollywood version. Giant explosions, rivers of molten rock, and terrified villagers running for their lives. And while, yes, volcanoes can certainly put on that kind of show, the truth is, these fiery giants have more moods than a medieval monarch on a Tuesday. From a gentle, goopy burp to an apocalyptic, sky-shattering scream, not all eruptions are created equal, and understanding their different personalities is key to appreciating just how wild our planet really is. Let's start with the chill, laid-back type, the gentle eruption. These are what scientists affectionately call effuse eruptions, and if you've ever seen footage of Hawaii's Kilauea, you've witnessed one in action. Imagine a very slow, very hot, and very destructive river of molten caramel. The lava is thin, runny, and flows out relatively calmly from the volcano's vents. It oozes, it creeps, it spreads. You can theoretically stand at a safe distance and watch it advance, sometimes even for days or weeks, as it swallows up everything in its path. Trees, roads, houses. It moves with an almost serene, unstoppable determination, like liquid rock politely but firmly reclaiming its territory. The dangers here are mostly to property, or if you get too close and accidentally become part of the new landscape. These effusive flows can create vast, shield-shaped volcanoes, built up layer by layer, much like a warrior's shield laid flat on the ground. Think broad, gentle slopes, not sharp, jagged peaks. But then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have the explosive rage eruptions. This is the stuff of legends and nightmares. These are the Plinian-type eruptions, named after Pliny the Younger, who famously witnessed the destruction of Pompeii. This isn't a gentle simmer. This is the earth throwing a tantrum of biblical proportions. Imagine a super-pressurized soda bottle, shaken furiously, then suddenly uncorked. Only instead of soda, it's superheated rock, ash, and volcanic gases, screaming skyward at hundreds of miles per hour. These eruptions blast a towering column of ash and debris miles into the stratosphere, sometimes even punching to the tropopause, reaching altitudes where commercial airplanes fly. The sky turns black. Ash rains down for miles, blanketing everything in a choking, suffocating shroud. And the truly terrifying part? The pyroclastic flows. These are superheated avalanches of gas and ash, moving at highway speeds, incinerating everything in their path. Nothing survives a pyroclastic flow. It's a geological express train of death. It doesn't bury you, it vaporizes you. So, what turned a volcano from a gentle, lava-spitting dragon into a full-blown, fire-breathing monster? It largely comes down to two key ingredients: magma viscosity and gas content. Viscosity is basically how thick or runny the magma is. Think of it like comparing honey to water. Honey is highly viscous. It flows slowly. Water is low viscosity. It flows freely. When magma is low in viscosity, like the stuff that comes out of Hawaiian volcanoes, gases can escape easily, bubbling out harmlessly, like gas from a gentle boiling pot. This leads to those calm, effusive flows. But when magma is thick and gooey, high in viscosity, it traps gases like a cork in a bottle. The pressure builds and builds, like shaking that soda bottle. And when that cork finally blows, it explodes violently. The higher the gas content and the thicker the magma, the more spectacular and deadly the eruption. Beyond magma's temper, other factors can influence an eruption's mood swings. Sometimes, it's about where the magma escapes. A vent at the summit might behave differently from a fissure opening on the flank of the mountain. Or what about water? If magma comes into contact with groundwater or ice, it can flash boil, creating incredibly powerful steam explosions, adding another layer of chaos to the mix. It's like a cosmic pressure cooker, constantly shifting its settings. These different moods, these wild swings from a fiery purr to an apocalyptic scream, directly dictate the kind of stories we're about to uncover. Because the way a volcano erupts isn't just a scientific detail. It's the difference between a new land being formed slowly over decades and an entire city being wiped from existence in a matter of minutes. It's the reason some ancient peoples lived in harmony with their smoking peaks, while others fled in terror, believing their gods had finally lost their patience. It's about how the earth expresses itself in all its fiery, beautiful, terrifying glory. And now that we understand the spectrum, let's take a closer look at these earth-shaking events, one devastating tale at a time. Alright, so you've got this mountain. It's usually just there, maybe a bit of smoke, a sulfurous whiff on a windy day. Harmless, right? Then, one afternoon, it starts a rumble. The ground shakes, cracks appear, and suddenly, the seemingly solid chunk of earth is spewing fire, rock, and ash into the sky, blotting out the sun and unleashing rivers of molten stone that swallow everything in their path. Now, imagine you're living a few thousand years ago. No seismographs, no geological surveys, no science channels explaining plate tectonics. What in the blazes do you make of that? You don't have charts and graphs to explain it. You don't have satellite imagery or neat little scientific terms like pyroclastic flow. What you have is your gut, your fear, and the collective wisdom of your ancestors, which, in this case, probably boiled down to the gods are really mad. Because, frankly, what other explanation is there for a mountain suddenly deciding to become a fire-breathing monster? It defied logic, it defied human control, and it was devastatingly, undeniably real. So, it only made sense that these terrifying forces of nature were personified. They became deities, giants, or the angry manifestations of powerful supernatural beings. Take the ancient Greeks, for instance. For them, the roaring, smoking Mount Etna in Sicily wasn't just a mountain. It was a forge of Hephaestus, the lame blacksmith god, known to the Romans as Vulcan. Every clang, every eruption, was just Hephaestus hammering away at a new shield for Zeus or a fresh set of armor for some hero. Sounds almost cozy, right? Until that cozy forge decides to melt your entire village. But Hephaestus wasn't the only fiery resident. The Greeks also believed the monstrous giant Typhon, a creature 100 snake heads and fire-breathing mouths, was buried alive under Mount Etna, trapped there by Zeus himself. Every time Typhon struggled, every time he moved, the island would shake and the volcano would erupt, spewing his furious breath across the land. So, you weren't just fleeing lava, you were fleeing the struggles of an imprisoned monster. Makes your Monday morning commute seem positively delightful by comparison, doesn't it? The Romans, ever practical but equally superstitious, worshipped Vulcan, the god of fire, smiths, and volcanoes. They built temples to him, especially outside cities like Rome, in the hope that keeping him happy on the outskirts would prevent his fiery temper from visiting the city center. Imagine an annual festival for Vulcan, the Vulcanalia, where they'd throw small fish and animals into bonfires as sacrifices. It was less about celebration and more about a very polite, very nervous, "Please don't burn us down today, almighty fire god." And this wasn't just a Greco-Roman thing. Across the world, cultures developed similar interpretations. Pacific Islanders, living amongst the most active volcanoes on Earth, had elaborate mythologies. Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of volcanoes, fire, lightning, and wind, is famously temperamental. Her eruptions were seen as expressions of her anger, her jealousy, or her passion. To appease her, offerings would be made, often of ohelo berries, pigs, or even human sacrifices in ancient times. You walked carefully around her domain, because you knew, deep in your bones, that you were in the presence of something alive, powerful, and utterly unforgiving. In Mesoamerica, while not always personified as direct volcano gods, the Earth's fiery activity was deeply intertwined with deities of creation, destruction, and sacrifice. The very mountains themselves were often seen as sacred beings or portals to the underworld, their eruptions a demand for blood, a sign of cosmic imbalance, or a warning from the gods about human transgressions. Imagine witnessing one of the colossal eruptions of Popocatépetl, near what will become Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital. How could you not believe it was the breath of a mighty deity, demanding reverence, demanding fear? Without any scientific understanding, ancient peoples were left with only observation and fear. They saw the ground tremble, the smoke rise, the sky turn black, and the rivers of fire consume everything. It was chaos, it was unpredictable, and always one. So, they did what humans do. They created stories. Stories to explain the inexplicable, to give agency to the unfeeling, and provide any means of control over the uncontrollable. Rituals, prayers, sacrifices, desperate attempts to appease the angry giant, to soothe the monstrous breath, to divert the fiery wrath. It was a constant negotiation, a terrified dance, with a force that truly did not care how many bonfires you lit or how many fish you threw into its fiery mouth. This fear, this profound sense of helplessness in the face of nature's raw power, wasn't just a footnote in their beliefs. It fundamentally shaped their worldview, their art, their religion, and even their daily lives. It meant that every time the ground rumbled, every time a new wisp of smoke appeared, the entire community would hold its breath, casting nervous glances at the mountain, wondering which god they had offended this time, and what terrible price would be demanded for their transgression. It was a grim, fiery reminder that despite all their ingenuity, despite all their burgeoning civilizations, they were still ultimately at the mercy of a living, breathing planet, with very, very strong opinions on personal space. And these opinions, as we're about to see, often came with cataclysmic consequences. Imagine the Aegean Sea, sparkling under a brilliant sun. Picture an island, lush and vibrant, home to a sophisticated people, master sailors and artists, living in beautiful, multi-story homes. It's idyllic, a paradise, until one day, the very ground beneath their feet began to grumble. Not a little tremor, but a deep, unsettling growl. This wasn't just any island. This was Thera, as it was known then, a single, towering volcanic cone, the heart of what we now call Santorini. And around 1600 BCE, this paradise was about to put on a show so cataclysmic. It would reshape geography and bury an entire civilization, leaving behind a mystery that still echoes today. Before the eruption, Thera wasn't that beautiful crescent moon shape you see on postcards. No, it was a much larger, roughly circular island, dominated by a colossal volcano. Its slopes were fertile, its harbors busy, teeming with the ships of Minoan civilization who called this place home. These were a people of advanced artistry, intricate plumbing, and a love for frescoes depicting bull leaping and dolphins. They lived well, perhaps too well, on the unsuspecting giant that lay beneath their feet. The Minoans, whose influence stretched across the Aegean, had built a thriving city on Thera's southern coast, now known as Akrotiri, a kind of Bronze Age Pompeii, preserved by ash, but without the human remains. Then came the first warning. Not subtle, but a series of earthquakes that likely caused significant damage to Akrotiri. The smart ones, the ones who listened to the rumbling earth, probably packed their bags and fled. And thank the gods they did, because what came next was beyond human comprehension. The Thera eruption, often called the Minoan eruption, was one of the most powerful volcanic events in recorded human history. It's estimated to have been a VI7 event, putting it in the same league as Krakatoa, or even larger. This wasn't a gentle burp. This was the earth screaming its lungs out. The eruption probably unfolded in several terrifying stages. First, a massive Plinian column of ash and pumice shot miles into the sky, blotting out the sun, turning day into an ash-choked twilight. Pumice, those light, porous volcanic rocks, rained down, burying the city layer by layer. Houses collapsed under the weight, street by street, block by block. Then came the pyroclastic flows, superheated avalanches of gas and debris, incinerating everything that had miraculously survived the initial ashfall. Imagine being caught in that. A superheated cloud of death hurtling towards you at hundreds of miles per hour. There would be no escape, no warning, just instant fiery obliteration. But the truly devastating punch came when the volcano's magma chamber, now empty by the colossal eruption, collapsed inwards. This created the massive caldera we see today, a giant crater filled by the sea. And that collapse triggered colossal tsunamis, waves perhaps hundreds of feet high, that roared across the Aegean Sea. These weren't just big waves. These were walls of water, obliterating coastal settlements across Crete, Rhodes, and beyond. The Minoan palaces on Crete, hundreds of miles away, show evidence of massive destruction around this time, suggesting their mighty navy and coastal cities were likely shattered by these very waves. The impact wasn't just local. The ash plume from Thera was so immense it drifted across the entire eastern Mediterranean, affecting climates for years, causing crop failures, and potentially even influencing events in ancient Egypt, though the exact links are still debated among historians. Think about that. A single volcanic eruption on a small Aegean island causing a ripple effect across the entire ancient world. It would have been an environmental catastrophe on a scale that ancient peoples had no way to comprehend. The very sky turned hostile, the sun dimmed, and the rhythm of life itself was thrown into disarray. Today, when you visit Santorini, you're not just seeing a beautiful island with whitewashed villages and stunning sunsets. You're standing in the mouth of a caldera, the very scar left by one of history's most devastating natural disasters. You can literally sail into the heart of a collapsed volcano, and beneath the ash, the preserved city of Akrotiri remains, a silent, poignant testament to the civilization that was swallowed whole. Its houses, its pottery, its vibrant frescoes, all frozen in time, waiting for us to uncover their stories. They left no trace of human remains, suggesting that the initial earthquakes provided enough warning for the inhabitants to evacuate, to escape the terrifying fate of those in Pompeii centuries later. But the island itself and the civilization it cradled were irrevocably transformed, forever changed by the Earth's fiery wrath. And that, as we'll see, is a common theme when these giants decide to clear their throats. All right, when you think about ancient Rome, you probably picture mighty legions, grand emperors, and a whole lot of marble. But imagine for a moment, slipping away from the bustling chaos of the capital, heading south to the Bay of Naples. This was Rome's playground, a sun-drenched paradise teeming with life, luxury, and a general air of we're rich, relaxed, and don't care about your problems. Here, nestled on fertile volcanic soil, lay two vibrant cities. Pompeii, a bustling port town, and its more upscale neighbor, Herculaneum, a charming seaside resort. Pompeii was the kind of place where life happened in glorious, technicolor detail. Its streets bustled with merchants hawking their wares. Taverns overflowed with loud laughter and cheap wine, and the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the distinct aroma of garum, that famously pungent Roman fish sauce. Villas adorned with intricate frescoes and mosaic floors lined the sun-drenched streets. Public baths, theaters, gladiatorial arenas. It was all here, catering to a population that valued leisure, entertainment, and a good, solid party. For its roughly 11,000 to 20,000 residents and the legions of visitors, this was a good life, unburdened by the political machinations of distant Rome. And Herculaneum? Even more exclusive. Perched right on the coast, it was a smaller, wealthier town, known for its elegant villas, multi-story homes, and direct access to the sea. Its inhabitants were often the elite, sophisticated Romans who sought quiet luxury and intellectual pursuits, far from the madding crowds. Think less raucous party town, more serene, opulent retreat. Both cities lived, breathed, and thrived in the shadow of a mountain. A rather picturesque, seemingly peaceful mountain, Mount Vesuvius. To the Romans of 79 AD, Vesuvius wasn't a threat. It was a backdrop, a majestic, verdant peak that contributed to the incredible fertility of the surrounding landscape. The soil, enriched by millennia of volcanic activity, produced some of the finest grapes and olives in the empire. Farmers tilled its slopes, villas were built into its foothills, and no one, absolutely no one, suspected that this silent giant was anything but a benign, beautiful guardian. Sure, there had been tremors over the years. A big earthquake in 62 AD had rocked the region, causing significant damage to Pompeii, which was still in the process of rebuilding. But earthquakes happened, didn't they? They were just part of living in this lively, unpredictable world. Nobody connected the dots to the mountain looming over them. Which brings us to the morning of August 24th, 79 AD. A seemingly ordinary day. Just like any other, the sun rose over the Bay of Naples, promising another warm, pleasant Mediterranean day. Bakers were stoking their ovens, slaves were preparing breakfast, and people were heading to market, the baths, or their daily duties. For most, the distant rumbling was just background noise, easily dismissed. Then, around midday, things changed, dramatically, with a force that truly defined explosive rage. Vesuvius blew its top, not with a gentle sigh, but with a roar that shattered the calm. A massive column of ash, pumice, and superheated gas, miles high, erupted from the summit. Pliny the Younger, watching from across the bay at Misenum, famously described it as resembling a pine tree in shape, dark and ominous against the bright sky. He was still years from writing his letter, but the image he captured, the terrifying mushroom-shaped cloud, remains iconic. For the residents of Pompeii, just a few miles from the volcano, the initial blast was deafening, the sky quickly turning a horrifying, apocalyptic black. Pumice stones, light and porous volcanic rock, began to rain down, first small, then larger, heavier. It was a bewildering, terrifying hail from a clear blue sky. People ran for cover, clutched their children, or, tragically, tried to shelter in their homes, believing the storm would pass. But the storm didn't pass. It intensified. The pumice piled up rapidly, feet thick in a matter of hours, collapsing roofs, trapping people inside, or burying them alive where they stood. Many tried to flee the city through the choked streets, stumbling over debris, choking on the acrid air. Some made it, but many didn't. This phase of the eruption lasted for hours, a relentless, suffocating assault. By evening, Pompeii was buried under a growing shroud of volcanic debris, its vibrant life slowly, inexorably snuffed out. Then came the real terror, especially for Herculaneum. While Pompeii was slowly choked and buried by falling ash, Herculaneum, positioned upwind and slightly further away, initially escaped the worst of the pumice fall. Many thought they were safe, that the worst was over. They were tragically, horrifyingly wrong. In the early morning hours of August 25th, Vesuvius unleashed a series of devastating pyroclastic flows. These weren't lava flows. Remember, we talked about those. These were superheated avalanches of gas, ash, and volcanic debris, screaming down the mountainside at speeds of up to 100 miles per hour or even more. The temperature? Upwards of 500 degrees Celsius. Sometimes even hotter. Think about that. Instant incineration. For Herculaneum, the first flow hit like a hammer blow. It was so fast, so hot, and so overwhelming that it simply carbonized everything in its path. People in Herculaneum didn't have time to be buried. They were flash vaporized, their bones exploding, their flesh instantly turning to charcoal. This is why, when archaeologists discovered Herculaneum, they found far fewer bodies than in Pompeii. But those they did find were often in chillingly contorted poses, frozen in their final, agonizing seconds. The city was buried not by ash, but by successive waves of these superheated, fast-moving flows, which solidified into a hard, dense volcanic rock, sealing the city in a natural, impossible tomb. When these cities were rediscovered centuries later, first in the 16th century, but systematically excavated starting in the mid-18th century, it was a moment of profound, chilling realization. Pompeii, buried mostly by ash and pumice, was preserved like a snapshot in time. Every detail, from graffiti on walls to frescoes in villas, from loaves of bread in ovens to human figures frozen in their final moments, was incredibly intact. Archaeologists developed a technique of pouring plaster into voids left by decomposed bodies, creating haunting casts of Vesuvius' victims, a woman clutching her child, a man shielding his face, a dog writhing in agony. It was the ultimate tragic time capsule. Herculaneum, encased in harder rock, yielded different, equally poignant discoveries. Intact wooden structures, papyrus scrolls carbonized but readable, and those chilling, superheated skeletons in the boat houses, often found huddled together, caught in their final attempt to escape. The horror, the suddenness, the sheer finality of that day, all laid bare for the world to see. Today, Mount Vesuvius still looms over the Bay of Naples, a constant, silent reminder of its terrifying power. It's one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world, surrounded by millions of people who live on its slopes, in the red zone, at constant risk. The day Rome's playground turned into a tomb remains a chilling testament to nature's unpredictable fury, a vivid, heartbreaking story etched into the very landscape, a reminder that even the grandest empires are but whispers against the Earth's enduring, fiery roar. All right, so we've set the stage. Vesuvius, that seemingly tranquil giant, has just decided to throw the mother of all tantrums. Now, imagine you're watching this apocalyptic fireworks display, not from inside the inferno, but from a relatively safe distance. That was the experience of a young Roman aristocrat named Pliny the Younger, a man whose quick wit and keen eye would, years later, give us one of history's most vivid and chilling eyewitness accounts of volcanic eruption. And it all started with a picnic or something like it. Pliny the Younger, probably still in his late teens or early 20s, was at Misenum, a naval base across the Bay of Naples, roughly 18 miles from Vesuvius. He was there with his uncle, Pliny the Elder, a true Renaissance man before the Renaissance was even a glimmer in anyone's eye. The Elder was a celebrated author, a natural historian, a commander of the Roman fleet at Misenum, and, crucially, a man whose insatiable curiosity often outweighed his common sense. The kind of guy who, when the world was ending, would grab a notepad instead of running for his life. The day, August 24th, 79 AD, began like any other, sunny and unremarkable, until around midday, that's when the cloud appeared. Not just any cloud, but a strange, dark column rising from Vesuvius, unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Pliny the Younger described it perfectly in his later letter to the historian Tacitus. Its general appearance can best be expressed as being like a pine tree, for it rose to a great height on a sort of trunk and then split off into branches. Think less fluffy cumulus, more ominous, mushroom-shaped harbinger of doom. For the Younger, it was a fascinating spectacle. For the Elder, it was a call to action. The Elder, ever the scholar and the man of duty, immediately recognized this wasn't ordinary weather. His scientific mind, that unyielding quest for knowledge, was instantly engaged. He ordered his fleet to prepare a light vessel, initially intending to get a closer look, to study this unprecedented phenomenon firsthand. But before he could embark on a scientific expedition, a desperate message arrived from friend Rectina, whose villa lay directly at the foot of Vesuvius. She was trapped, terrified, and begging for rescue. That shifted the Elder's purpose from academic curiosity to heroic, yet ultimately doomed compassion. So, Pliny the Elder, this brilliant, brave, perhaps foolishly daring man, changed course. He converted his reconnaissance mission into a rescue operation, steering his ships directly towards a rapidly intensifying horror. Think about that. While everyone else was fleeing the growing ash cloud, this man was sailing straight into it, a Roman ship commander, propelled by a mixture of scientific zeal and noble intent. He knew the danger. He saw the falling pumice and ash, the darkening sky, the terrifying rumbles that shook the sea itself. Yet, he pressed on, determined to save others, or at the very least, understand what was happening. Meanwhile, back in Misenum, young Pliny the Younger watched the horror unfold from a distance. He describes the ash beginning to fall, first like flakes of soot, then thicker, heavier. The light faded to a blacker and thicker than any night. The ground began to shake violently, swaying backwards and forwards as if released from its foundations. He and his mother tried to escape, stumbling through the choking darkness, guided only by the shouts of others and the terrifying knowledge that the world seemed to be coming to an end. Imagine trying to breathe in air thick with ash, navigating a suddenly alien landscape, while tremors constantly threaten to bring you to your knees. The sheer, terrifying sensory overload of it all is palpable in his words. As for the Elder, his journey was far grimmer. He successfully landed at Stabi, a town further south, where he found his friend Pomponinus, trapped and paralyzed by fear. The Elder, despite the chaos, tried to offer comfort, to appear calm, even requesting a bath and a meal, almost as if to prove to himself and others that life could continue amidst the apocalypse. But the air grew thicker with sulphurous fumes, making breathing increasingly difficult. He tried to sleep, though the house itself was shaking, and outside, the ground was rising with volcanic material, making escape impossible. Early the next morning, as the pyroclastic flows began to hit, the elder succumbed. His body was found days later, seemingly at peace, untouched by the fires, but suffocated by the noxious gases. A truly noble, if tragic, end for a man driven by knowledge. Pliny the Younger, surviving the ordeal, chose to recount his experience years later, in two famous letters to his friend and fellow historian, Tacitus. These weren't immediate, panicked dispatches. They were carefully composed narratives, written with the benefit of hindsight and a historian precision. He detailed not just a natural disaster, but the human reaction. The fear, the courage, the despair, the strange normalcy that clung to people even as their world dissolved into ash. His account is a masterpiece of historical writing, giving us an unparalleled, direct window into one of the ancient world's greatest tragedies. And his most profound insight, that amidst the chaos, the fear, and the overwhelming power of nature, human beings still tried to make sense of it, still acted with courage, and still, somehow, found the words to describe the indescribable. His letters didn't just document an eruption. They immortalized the people caught within its terrifying embrace, transforming a geological event into an enduring human story. It's a reminder that even when mountains decide to become monsters, humanity, in its own small way, continues to bear witness, and to remember, because, as we're about to see, Vesuvius was far from the only ancient giant to make its presence felt in a truly devastating way, and some of those impacts stretched across entire continents. Alright, so we've talked about volcanoes that wipe out cities in a fiery flash. Localized, horrific, but contained. Now, imagine a volcano so powerful, so utterly unhinged, that it changes the very weather across an entire continent, or even a whole planet. Imagine the sun, your dependable, life-giving celestial orb, suddenly going dim, not set and not eclipsed, but just weaker, as if a giant invisible hand has pulled a massive, ash-colored curtain across the sky. This isn't science fiction. This is a chilling, devastating reality of what happens when certain volcanoes decide to truly unleash their global fury. You see, it's not the lava that does it. Lava flows are terrifying, yes, but they generally stay relatively close to the volcano. The real culprits, the invisible assassins that reach across oceans and chill entire seasons, are the aerosols. When a colossal, explosive eruption happens, the kind that blasts a column miles into the stratosphere, that upper layer of Earth's atmosphere, it doesn't just send up ash. It also injects massive amounts of sulfur dioxide gas. And this, my friends, is where the trouble begins. Once in the stratosphere, that sulfur dioxide gas reacts with water vapor to form tiny, reflective sulfuric acid aerosols. Think of them as microscopic mirrors, billions upon billions of them, suspended high above the clouds. And what do mirrors do? They reflect sunlight. So, instead of that glorious solar energy reaching Earth's surface and warming us up, a significant portion of it gets bounced right back into space. The result? Global dimming, and then global cooling. It's like strapping a giant, invisible parasol to the entire planet. And it doesn't care how many beach days you have planned. The more sulfur dioxide injected, the more widespread the aerosols, and the longer they stay up there, the more pronounced the effect. And these tiny particles, they can hang around the stratosphere for months, even years, drifting around the globe on high-altitude winds, spreading their chilly influence far and wide. It's a slow, insidious form of climatic sabotage orchestrated by nature itself. And when it happens, the consequences for humanity are rarely pleasant, often devastating. One of the most infamous examples is the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia in 1815. We'll get to its full, terrifying story later, but suffice it to say, this was a VI 7, sometimes even called a VI 8 event, truly gargantuan. The amount of sulfur it injected into the atmosphere was immense. The result? 1816 became known as the year without a summer. In places like New England, snow fell in June. Crop failures were widespread across Europe and North America. Rivers froze in July. People starved. Riots broke out over food. It was a brutal, bewildering time, all because a mountain on the other side of the world had effectively dimmed the sun. But Tambora wasn't an isolated incident. Decades earlier, from 1783 to 1784, the Loki-Fish eruption in Iceland, a series of prolonged, effusive eruptions, but with enormous sulfur output, blanketed much of Europe in a dry fog or locky haze. This wasn't just a nuisance. It was toxic. Crops failed due to reduced sunlight and acid rain. Livestock died from ingesting fluorine-laced ash. In Iceland itself, a quarter of the population perished from famine and disease, directly attributable to the eruption's fallout. Even in France, it's believed the locky haze contributed to widespread crop failures, which didn't exactly help the pre-revolutionary atmosphere. Go back even further, much further, and you find a truly mind-bending scale. The Toba supervolcano eruption in Sumatra, roughly 74,000 years ago, was a VI-8 event, potentially the largest eruption of the last 2.5 million years. It threw so much ash and aerosols into the atmosphere that some theories suggest it caused a volcanic winter, lasting 6 to 10 years, plunging the Earth into a brutal ice age that might have dramatically reduced the human population, leaving only a few thousand survivors. Think about that, a single geological event almost wiping out our species. It's a chilling thought, putting our relatively comfortable existence into stark perspective. The impact of these global chillers wasn't just about a drop in temperature. It was a cascade of disasters. Crop failures led to widespread famine, which led to disease as weakened populations succumbed to illnesses they might otherwise have fought off. Famine and disease led to mass migrations, social unrest, and often violent conflict over dwindling resources. Entire economies could collapse, governments could fall, and the very fabric of society could unravel, all triggered by an invisible atmospheric shift originating thousands of miles away. And here's the truly terrifying part for ancient peoples. They had no idea why it was happening. The sun was going dim. The seasons were breaking. The crops were failing, but there was no immediate, visible cause. No marauding army, no obvious plague. Just a silent, creeping cold, and a sky that seemed to be actively betraying them. They would have attributed it to divine wrath, to a breakdown in cosmic order, to a curse. And their desperate, bewildered attempts to appease the heavens or make sense of chaos would have been truly profound. How do you sacrifice to a God you can't see for a problem you can't explain? So, when volcanoes decide to truly stretch their legs, their impact isn't just felt by those living nearby. It's a planetary affair. The sun, our lifeblood, can be dimmed, the seasons can be broken, and the delicate balance of our global climate can be thrown into disarray, sometimes for years. It's a chilling reminder that our Earth is a system, a complex, interconnected dance of elements, and when one part of that system decides to let off some steam, the whole planet can feel the chill and the hunger. And some of those stories, as we'll soon discover, are among the most desperate and resilient in all of human history. Alright, so we talked about what a volcanic eruption actually is: magma, gas, tectonic plates, all that jazz. But now, let's yank ourselves out of the comfort of modern science and plop right into the middle of medieval Europe. Imagine you're a peasant. Your life revolves around livestock, weather, and not freezing to death. The world is flat, angels and demons are very real, and the church has a lot to say about pretty much everything, especially why bad things happen. Now, suddenly one of those quiet, seemingly innocent mountains decides to go full-on pyroclastic tantrum. What's a humble medieval soul to do with that information? You don't have Greek myths of Hephaestus hammering away, or Hawaiian legends of Pele's fiery jealousy. No. In the medieval Christian worldview, everything, and I mean everything, was a sign. A direct message from either God, the saints, or, more likely, the devil himself. And a mountain exploding with fire and brimstone? That wasn't just a sign. That was a full-blown, shouting from the rooftop sermon, delivered with maximum terrifying effect. The first, most obvious explanation? Divine wrath. You've clearly sinned. Or your neighbor has. Or the whole village. And God is not amused. Natural disasters of any kind, famine, plague, floods, were almost universally interpreted as God's righteous anger, a punishment for humanity's endless capacity for moral failings. A volcano, spewing fire and smoke from the bowels of the earth, felt like the ultimate, visceral manifestation of divine displeasure. "Repent, you sinners," the rumbling mountain seemed to roar, "or suffer eternal damnation." Priests would reinforce this message from the pulpit, using the terrifying spectacle to scare the flock into piety, confession, and naturally paying their tithes. Because nothing says, "I'm sorry, God," like an extra chicken to the church. But it wasn't just about God's anger. For many medieval peasants, these fiery mountains were literally portals to the underworld. Imagine a deep, dark hole of the earth, constantly smoking, occasionally belching fire and terrifying noises. Sound an awful lot like the descriptions of hell from Sunday sermons, doesn't it? Rivers of fire, lakes of boiling blood, eternal wailing. All those vivid, terrifying details that medieval preachers loved to paint for their congregations. A smoking volcano, for all intents and purposes, was a glimpse into that infernal realm, a literal mouth of hell opening up on earth. Legends of St. Patrick's Purgatory, a real cave and island believed to be a gateway to the afterlife, fueled these fears. If one could enter the other world through a cave, why not through a fiery mountain? Demons, the inhabitants of hell, were seen as very real entities, constantly scheming to lure souls to damnation. So, if fire and smoke and terrifying noises were coming out of a mountain, perhaps it wasn't just a gate. Perhaps demons themselves were stirring, or even escaping, bringing their infernal chaos into the mortal realm. You weren't just running from lava. You were running from the very real possibility of encountering a pitchfork-wielding fiend from the abyss. Now, most European peasants wouldn't have had a local, active volcano right in their backyard. The really famous ones, like Etna and Stromboli, were far away in the Mediterranean, primarily affecting southern Italy and Sicily. But stories travel faster than plague rats. Merchants, pilgrims, and returning crusaders would bring back terrifying tales of fiery mountains, of lands scorched and people vanished, all filtered through the lens of their medieval beliefs. These weren't just travelogues. They were cautionary tales, reinforcing the power of God, the omnipresence of sin, and the ever-present threat of demonic activity. Even inactive volcanoes, or dormant ones that showed subtle signs of life, might acquire monstrous reputations. A mountain with strange rock formations, a wisp of sulfurous gas, or even just an odd echo in a cave could spark local legends of dragons sleeping beneath the earth, or subterranean beasts stirring in their lair. These weren't just metaphors. For many, they were literal, tangible dangers, requiring prayers, blessings, and perhaps the occasional brave knight, or a very reluctant peasant, to go investigate. Though, let's be honest, most peasants would rather wrestle a bear than peek into a dragon's mouth. The church, of course, played a crucial role in shaping and reinforcing these explanations. They were the arbiters of truth, the interpreters of divine will. Natural disasters were often used as powerful tools of social control. If you don't confess your sins, if you don't live right, if you don't fear God, the implicit message went, then perhaps that fiery mountain will awaken near your village next. Processions, relics, and fervent prayers were organized to avert disaster, offering a desperate sense of agency in the face of the incomprehensible. It was a vicious cycle of fear and faith, fueled by the raw, terrifying power of the earth itself. So, while we can now explain the complex geology behind an eruption for the medieval mind, it was a terrifyingly simple, yet utterly profound truth. It was God's judgment, the devil's work, or a monster's breath. It was a visceral reminder of humanity's insignificance, a direct connection to the cosmic forces of good and evil that were constantly battling for their souls. And unlike us, they couldn't just change the channel or scroll past the news. For them, the monstrous rumbling mountain was a very real, very present, and very terrifying part of their everyday reality. A reality that, as we'll see, continued to make its presence felt in truly devastating ways, even as the world progressed. Alright, so we've talked about what happens when a volcano just goes full on Hollywood, right? Blasting ash and pumice miles into the sky, swallowing cities whole. But sometimes, a volcano is far more insidious. It doesn't scream. It just breathes, And that breath, silent and invisible, can choke out life across an entire continent. That's the chilling story of Laki, a geological event in Iceland that unleashed a lethal fog that literally starved Europe. Imagine Iceland. It's a land forged by fire and ice, a place where the Earth's raw power is constantly on display. Geysers hiss, glaciers creep, and volcanoes are a part of the everyday landscape. The folks who lived there in the late 18th century were tough, self-reliant, and intimately familiar with the unpredictable moods of their island home. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared them for what began on June 8, 1783. This wasn't a classic cone-shaped volcano erupting with a singular, dramatic plume. No, Laki is a fissure volcano. Think of it like a colossal, miles-long crack opening up in the Earth's crust, spilling its fiery guts onto the surface. On that fateful day, a roughly 16-mile-long fissure, with over 130 individual craters, ripped open in southern Iceland. For 8 long months, from June 1783 to February 1784, Laki wasn't just erupting, it was hemorrhaging. Rivers of basalt lava, some of the largest flows in recorded history, pour across the landscape, burying farms, villages, and vital grazing lands. It was destructive, yes, but the lava itself, as always, stayed relatively local. The real killer, the silent, invisible assassin, was a sheer, unimaginable volume of volcanic gases. Laki pumped out an estimated 120 million tons of sulfur dioxide, along with massive amount of fluorine, into the atmosphere. Think of it like the planet clearing its throat with a particularly noxious 8-month-long cough. For Iceland, the immediate impact was catastrophic. The sulfur dioxide mixed with atmospheric water vapor, creating a dense, acidic haze that hung over the island. This wasn't just a thick fog. It was a lethal, corrosive blanket. People called it the Mohardindi, or mist hardships. Sunlight was severely dimmed, reducing visibility to almost zero in places. Crops withered, choked by the reduced light and acid rain. But the fluorine was even worse. The ash, laced with fluorine, settled on pastures. Livestock, sheep, cattle, horses grazed on it, ingesting the toxic compounds. Fluorine poisoning attacked their bones and teeth, causing deformities, sickness, and mass death. Imagine your entire livelihood, your only source of food and warmth, literally crumbling and dying before your eyes. The consequences were utterly devastating. Over 80% of Iceland's sheep, 50% of its cattle, and 50% of its horses perished. Without livestock, the people starved. Famine and disease ravaged the population, leading to the deaths of roughly 25% of Iceland's inhabitants. That's 1 in 4 people, gone, all because a silent, acidic fog had descended upon their island. It was a national tragedy, a testament to how vulnerable humanity truly is to the whims of its planet. And the horror didn't stop at Iceland's shores. That massive, sulfurous plume didn't just hang over Iceland. Oh no, high-altitude winds caught it, and over the summer of 1783, it drifted across the entire northern hemisphere. It became known as the Laki haze, or the dry fog, a persistent, strange atmospheric phenomenon that blanketed much of Europe, North America, and parts of Asia. People described a pervasive bluish haze that dimmed the sun, causing eerie blood-red sunsets and sunrises. It wasn't just a visual oddity. It tasted and smelled of sulfur. Imagine stepping outside and constantly smelling rotten eggs, or feeling a metallic tang in the air. For months, the Laki haze had devastating climatic effects. It's believed to have led to an unusually hot summer in 1783, then an extremely severe winter in 1783 to 1784. The haze reduced incoming solar radiation, leading to widespread cooling, especially during the winter months. Rivers and lakes froze solid in parts of Europe that rarely saw such cold. This wasn't just uncomfortable. It triggered massive agricultural failures. Crops failed not only due to reduced sunlight and the corrosive effects of acid rain, but also due to the extreme temperature swings and subsequent flooding when the massive snow and ice thawed in spring. Food shortages became rampant across Europe. In France, the Laki haze is sometimes speculatively linked to the widespread crop failures that fueled the already simmering social unrest and economic hardship. contributing to the explosive conditions that would lead to the French Revolution just a few years later. Imagine the price of bread, a peasant staple, skyrocketing, leading to riots and desperation, all because of an invisible, toxic fog that drifted from an island thousands of miles away. It's a chilling demonstration of how deeply interconnected our global climate truly is, and how a seemingly distant geological event can have profound, continent-spanning, history-altering consequences. For the people living through it, the Laki haze was a profound mystery. They had no idea it originated from a volcano in Iceland. They attributed it to divine judgment, to strange astrological alignments, to a general breakdown in the natural order. How do you fight a silent, invisible killer that dims the sun and makes your animals die without obvious cause? You pray, you fast, you offer sacrifices, and you watch, bewildered and terrified, as the world seems to slowly, inexplicably die around you. It was a crisis of faith as much as a crisis of survival. A silent, insidious reminder that sometimes the earth doesn't need a thunderous roar to bring continents to their knees. Sometimes all it needs is a long, slow, toxic breath. All right, so we've seen how Laki breathed out a toxic fog that choked a continent. Insidious, devastating, but relatively quiet. Now, forget quiet, forget subtle. Imagine a volcano that doesn't just breathe, it roars. A sound so utterly deafening, so impossibly loud, that it shatters silence across thousands of miles, plunges the entire planet into a chilling gloom, and ushers in a year where summer itself simply disappears. This isn't a biblical flood or a cosmic plague. This is a chilling, devastating, true story of Tambara's revenge, the eruption that stole a year's warmth from the world. Picture Indonesia, the early 19th century, a land of emerald islands, lush jungles, and, crucially, the notorious Ring of Fire, Earth's most volcanically active belt. Here, on the island of Sumbawa, stood Mount Tambora, a majestic, conical peak, towering over 13,000 feet. For centuries, it had slept, seemingly peaceful, cultivating its reputation as a picturesque backdrop. Local populations, like the Tambora culture, thrived on its fertile slopes, unaware that they were living on a powder keg, a colossal geological time bomb counting down to an unimaginable explosion. Then, on April 5th, 1815, Tambora stirred, not with a gentle sigh, but with a series of thunderous rumbles and ash plumes that shook the surrounding islands. A week later, on April 10th, 1815, it unleashed hell. This wasn't just an eruption. This was a planetary event of VI 7, sometimes even categorized as a VI 8, putting it firmly in the supercolossal league. It was arguably the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history, dwarfing even Krakatoa's later performance. The sound of the main explosion? It was heard over 1,600 miles away, across the entire Indonesian archipelago, in Sumatra, Java, and Borneo. Think about that. A single geological event so loud it could be heard across entire countries, across vast oceans. It was the earth screaming at the top of its lungs. The immediate local devastation was absolute, beyond human comprehension. The 13,000-foot peak of Tambora literally exploded, collapsing its summit to create a massive caldera nearly 4 miles across. It blasted an estimated 36 to 70 cubic miles of ash, pumice, and aerosols into the atmosphere. The blast wiped out the entire Tambora culture, instantly. No survivors, just a civilization erased in a single, terrifying moment. Pyroclastic flows, superheated avalanches of gas and rock, screamed down the mountain's flanks, incinerating everything. Ash, feet thick, buried entire islands. Darkness descended for days, turning midday into a suffocating, terrifying night. And the sea, oh, the sea. The colossal displacement of water from the eruption triggered massive tsunamis, waves up to 13 feet high, that crashed into nearby islands, sweeping away villages and drowning thousands more. Famine and disease followed quickly for those who initially survived the blasts and waves. Crops were buried, water supplies contaminated, and the sheer scale of destruction left no means of recovery. Tens of thousands perished in the immediate aftermath, a tragic testament to the raw, unbridled fury of Earth's interior. But Tambora wasn't done. Its real, insidious revenge was just beginning. That unimaginable volume of ash and, crucially, sulfur dioxide, blasted high into the stratosphere, began its silent global journey. Just like with Laki, the sulfur dioxide transformed into tiny, reflective sulfuric acid aerosols, creating a colossal, invisible shield high above the Earth. And as these aerosols drifted and spread, they began to do what they do best: reflect sunlight. The amount of solar radiation reaching Earth's surface plummeted. The sun, our familiar life-giver, grew dim, veiled by a pervasive reddish-brown haze, and the planet began to cool. Slowly, insidiously, globally. The consequences became chillingly apparent in 1816, especially across the northern hemisphere. This was the year without a summer. Imagine spring arriving, but the chill never truly leaves. Farmers plant their crops, but the seeds refuse to sprout, or the fragile seedlings are killed by persistent frosts. In May, Europe was hit by a severe frost, followed by relentless rain. In June, in places like New England, snow fell. Actual, measurable snow, blanketing fields and towns in what should have been the blooming warmth of summer. Rivers that should have been flowing freely remained frozen. Birds, disoriented, fell dead from the sky. This wasn't just a nuisance. It was an existential crisis. Crop failures became widespread, leading to devastating famine across Europe and North America. The price of oats skyrocketed, killing horses and disrupting transport. The price of wheat and corn became exorbitant, pushing millions to the brink of starvation. People resorted to eating wild roots, grass, even sawdust. Food riots broke out in France, Germany, Ireland, and Great Britain. Cities saw desperate, starving populations, while rural areas faced unprecedented hardship. Diseases like typhus and cholera thrived amidst the weakened, malnourished populations, claiming even more lives. It was a brutal, bewildering time, all because a mountain on the other side of the world had decided to clear its throat very, very loudly. For the people living through it, this was a profound, terrifying mystery. They had no idea about Mount Tambora. They knew nothing of stratospheric aerosols or global climate patterns. All they knew was that the weather had broken. The seasons were upside down. The sun was sick. They attributed it to divine wrath, to cosmic imbalance, to a general breakdown in the natural order. Preachers delivered fiery sermons, warning of the end times. Astrologers searched the heavens for answers. People prayed, fasted, and watched, bewildered and terrified, as the very rhythm of life seemed to unravel. It was a crisis of faith as much as a crisis of survival. And in a strange, haunting twist, this year of global misery even inspired some of humanity's most enduring art. Trapped indoors during that cold, dark, endless summer, a group of writers gathered at a villa on Lake Geneva, Switzerland. Among them, Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and his future wife, Mary Shelley. To pass the time, they challenged each other to write ghost stories. And from that challenge, born of Tambora's chill, came two masterpieces of Gothic literature: Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Lord Byron's poem Darkness. Both in their own ways, reflections of a world turned cold and dark. Imagine a volcanic eruption directly influencing the birth of classic horror. So, Tambora's eruption wasn't just a local catastrophe. It was a global climatic shockwave, a chilling reminder of how deeply interconnected our planet truly is, and how vulnerable humanity remains to its raw, untamed power. It shattered societies, triggered famines, and, in its own terrifying way, changed the course of history, all by simply stealing the sun's warmth. Because sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't a fiery blaze, but a quiet, creeping cold, brought on by a mountain that roared loud enough to be heard around the entire world. And that roar, as we'll see, wouldn't be the last to echo across the oceans. Alright, so we've covered volcanoes that slowly poison a continent, and those that bury cities in a flash. But what about a volcano so utterly unhinged, so astronomically powerful, that its very sound reverberated across the entire planet? A geological thunderclap that didn't just wake the neighbors, but startled folks thousands of miles away and literally sent ripples through the atmosphere for days? That, my friends, is the terrifying, awe-inspiring story of Krakatoa, the Indonesian island that, in August of 1883, roared so loud it shook the very fabric of the world. Picture this. The year is 1883. Krakatoa is a relatively small, uninhabited volcanic island in the Sunda Strait, between the much larger islands of Java and Sumatra, in what was then the Dutch East Indies. It was part of the notoriously volatile Ring of Fire, a geological hotspot responsible for some of Earth's most dramatic tantrums. For centuries, Krakatoa had been mostly quiet, a triple-peak volcanic sentinel rising innocently from the waves. Sure, it had a history of violence, but its last major eruption was way back in 1680. So, most people living their bustling colonial lives on the nearby, densely populated islands of Java and Sumatra probably just saw it as a pretty distant landmark. They were tragically, horrifyingly mistaken. The rumbling started slowly, subtly, in May of 1883. Small eruptions, steam plumes, minor ash falls. For months, it was like the volcano was clearing its throat, testing its vocal cords. Ships passing through the strait would report strange sounds, distant explosions. Scientists, a handful of them, noted the increased activity. But by late August, the warm-up was over. Krakatoa was ready for its main act. The explosions intensified throughout the day of August 26th, building in frequency and ferocity. And then, on the morning of August 27th, the real show began. Not just one explosion, but a series of four gargantuan, almost inconceivable blasts, the loudest occurring at 10:02 a.m. local time. This wasn't a roar, this was the earth screaming. The force of that final explosion was truly incomprehensible. It's estimated to have been a VEI 6 event, yielding about 200 megatons of TNT, roughly 13,000 times the power of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The island itself, Krakatoa, literally tore itself apart, collapsing into a massive submarine caldera, leaving only a small sliver of land behind. But the truly mind-bending part? The sound. Oh, the sound. This wasn't just audible. It was physically felt, a monstrous concussion wave that traveled unimaginable distances. People on ships within 40 miles of the island went deaf instantly, their eardrums ruptured by the sheer force of the blast. Sailors on vessels 100 miles away reported the air itself feeling like a solid wall, vibrating violently. Imagine being on deck, and the very air around you feels like a giant, invisible fist. But it didn't stop there. The explosion was distinctly heard in Perth, Australia, over 1,900 miles away. It was heard on Rodriguez Island in the Indian Ocean, a staggering 3,000 miles away. Think about that. A sound wave traveling further than the width of the entire United States. It's the loudest sound ever recorded in human history. To put it in perspective, if you stood in New York City and something made a sound that loud, it would be heard clearly in Los Angeles, in London, in Tokyo, everywhere. The sound wave from Krakatoa didn't just travel through the air. It literally wrapped around the planet. Barographs, instruments used to measure atmospheric pressure, recorded the pressure wave traversing the globe 3 to 4 times over several days. Imagine the very air you were breathing, the pressure around you, subtly, imperceptibly fluctuating for days, all because a tiny island in Indonesia had decided to let out a really, really loud burp. It was a physical manifestation of a global interconnectedness that the world, in 1883, was only just beginning to grasp. But the sound, as terrifying as it was only one part of Krakatoa's destructive symphony. The collapse of the caldera triggered colossal tsunamis that devastated the nearby coastlines of Java and Sumatra. Waves up to 120 feet high roared ashore, obliterating everything in their path. Coastal towns and villages, unsuspecting and unprepared, were simply swallowed by the sea. Lighthouses, once guiding beacons, were swept away like toys. The death toll from the tsunamis alone was staggering, estimated at over 36,000 people. It was a swift, overwhelming act of watery destruction, far more deadly than the blast itself for those living nearby. And the impact extended far beyond the immediate region. Like Tambora before it, Krakatoa injected massive amounts of ash and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. This caused brilliant, fiery red sunsets and sunrises across the globe for years afterward, as the volcanic aerosols scattered sunlight in spectacular fashion. Artists like William Ashcroft painted hundreds of these vibrant, atmospheric skies from London, capturing the lasting, beautiful, yet eerie aftereffects of Krakatoa's global reach. Temperatures across the Earth also dropped slightly for the next few years, though not as severely as with Tambora, as the sulfuric acid aerosols reflected incoming sunlight back into space. For the nascent scientific community of the late 19th century, Krakatoa was a profound, real-time laboratory. It proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the global climatic reach of volcanic eruptions. It fundamentally shaped our understanding of atmospheric physics and long-range sound propagation. And for the world at large, it was a visceral, undeniable reminder of nature's raw, untamed power. A single uninhabited island had, with a series of truly epic blasts, sent a message that reverberated across continents, chilling the climate and painting the sky. It proved that sometimes the Earth doesn't just rumble, it screams. And when it screams, everyone, everywhere listens, whether they want to or not. Alright, so we've seen how Vesuvius could freeze a city in time with ash, and Krakatoa could deafen a continent with its roar. But what about a volcano that simply utterly makes an entire thriving city vanish in a literal flash? No long burial, no slow choke, just poof. That's a chilling, almost unbelievable story of Mount Pelee, a seemingly serene Caribbean peak that, on one horrific morning, erased St. Pierre from the map almost without a trace. Imagine Martinique in the early 1900s. It's a French colonial gem, lush tropical and impossibly beautiful. And at its heart, nestled on the Caribbean coast, lies St. Pierre. This wasn't just any town. This was the Paris of the Caribbean, a vibrant, bustling city of around 30,000 souls. It boasted grand stone buildings, elegant theaters, lively markets, and a deep-water harbor perpetually bustling with ships. Its cafes spilled onto cobblestone streets. Its opera house rivaled those in Europe, and its reputation for luxury and culture was known far and wide. Life was good, prosperous, and, in the charming way of islanders, perhaps a little too complacent. Because right there, looming majestically over the city, was Mount Pelee, a dormant volcano, its slopes verdant and inviting, a beautiful, silent backdrop to this tropical paradise. For centuries, Pelee had been quiet, lulling the inhabitants into a false sense of security. Its last significant eruption was way back in 1792, while outside living memory. It was just a mountain, a source of fertile soil and picturesque views. But in early April 1902, the mountain began to stir, subtly at first. Small tremors, a few puffs of steam from new vents high on its slopes. Nothing to panic about, surely, just a mountain clearing its throat, perhaps a little indigestion. But then, as the days wore on, the signs became harder to ignore. Ash, fine and gray, began to fall, dusting the city like an unwelcome snow. The air grew thick with the smell of sulfur, that unmistakable rotten egg stench that always signals trouble. People reported animals behaving strangely. Snakes, notoriously sensitive to ground vibrations, were seen fleeing the slopes en masse, slithering into the city, even into homes. Birds abandoned their nests, flying erratically, sensing a deeper dread. It was like nature itself was screaming a warning, but the humans, bless their stubborn hearts, weren't quite listening. By the first week of May, the situation escalated dramatically. Ash fell more heavily, turning the city gray. The tremors grew stronger, more frequent. And then came the devastating River Blanche event. On May 5th, a massive lahar, a fast-moving volcanic mudflow, tore down the River Blanche Valley, which fed directly into the sea near St. Pierre. This wasn't just mud. It was a boiling, viscous torrent of volcanic debris, ash, and superheated water. It utterly annihilated the Garin sugar factory at the river's mouth, incinerating buildings and killing all 150 workers there in an instant. This was a direct, horrifying, unequivocal message from Pelee, a clear sign of its murderous intent. Yet, inexplicably, the city didn't fully evacuate. In fact, due to the destruction in the surrounding countryside, refugees from the smaller villages actually began to flock into St. Pierre, swelling its population to perhaps 40,000 or more, seeking safety in what they believed was a modern and therefore safe urban center. Oh, the irony! And this is where the human element, the tragic blend of politics, complacency, and hubris, truly plays its part. A crucial election was approaching, scheduled for May 10th. The colonial authorities, the governor, and the local political establishment were desperate to maintain order, to prevent panic, and to ensure the election went smoothly. Evacuating the city, their economic and political hub, was unthinkable. Official commissions were formed, scientists were consulted, and reassuring proclamations were issued. One on May 7th famously stated there was no immediate danger to the city. People were told to stay calm, to stay put. Roads out of the city were allegedly even blocked to prevent a mass exodus. They were trapped not just by ash, but by bureaucracy, by economic interests, and by a terrifying cocktail denial. Then came the morning of May 8th, 1902, Ascension Day, a beautiful, clear, sunny Thursday, just like any other Caribbean morning. Birds chirped, church bells chimed, and the city stirred unsuspecting. The air was calm, the wind still. Then, at precisely 7:52 a.m., Mount Pelee unleashed its full, terrifying fury. Not with Plinian column of ash high into the sky, not with slow lava flow, but with something far deadlier for a city so close, a directed pyroclastic flow, a nuée ardente, or glowing cloud, as it would later be called. Imagine a superheated, incandescent cloud of volcanic gas, ash, and rock fragments denser than air, traveling sideways, directly down the mountainside, at speeds of over 100 miles per hour, perhaps even 200. It was an instant, overwhelming, incinerating avalanche. St. Pierre simply vanished. In less than a minute, the entire city, its 30,000 to 40,000 inhabitants, its elegant buildings, its bustling harbor, all was utterly, completely, irrevocably obliterated. The heat was so intense, estimated to be over 1,000 degrees Celsius, that it didn't just bury, it carbonized. Buildings imploded. Ships in the harbor instantly capsized and caught fire, their masts snapping like matchsticks. Humans, caught in the open, were flash incinerated, their flesh vaporized. Those inside buildings, if they weren't crushed, were suffocated by the superheated, oxygen-depleted gas, their lungs seared in an instant. There was no escape, no time to react, no mercy. The entire city became a smoldering, silent ruin, its vibrant life snuffed out in a blink. And yet, miraculously, almost bizarrely, there was a survivor, a single, confirmed survivor from inside the city itself. Louis Ogu Cyprus, a dock worker who, the night before, had been thrown into the thick-walled dungeon of the city jail for public drunkenness after a bar brawl. The dungeon, built to withstand tropical storms and rioting prisoners, unintentionally became an oven, but one that protected him from the initial blast and the superheated gas. He suffered horrific burns, but he lived. For days later, rescuers found him bewildered, injured, but very much alive in his unlikely, fiery tomb. The ultimate irony. A man's drunken antics saved his life, while thousands of his sensible neighbors perished. Cyprus later joined the Barnum and Bailey Circus, famously touring as the only survivor of St. Pierre, performing from a replica of his jail cell. A grim, strange celebrity, a living testament to an unthinkable tragedy. St. Pierre was never truly rebuilt. It remains a ghost town, a poignant, chilling memorial to the utter totality of nature's fury and perhaps human folly. The eruption of Mount Pelee was a horrific wake-up call for volcanologists worldwide. It was one of the first times the sheer, devastating power of a pyroclastic flow, that nuée ardente, was truly understood. It fundamentally changed how scientists classify and predict volcanic hazards, leading to new evacuation protocols and a deeper, far more respectful understanding of these silent, simmering giants. Because sometimes a volcano doesn't just rumble, it sighs. And sometimes that sigh is the last breath an entire city ever takes. Alright, so we've covered volcanoes that make cities vanish in a fiery breath, and islands disappear into the sea. Localized, terrifying, but often in distant lands or ancient times. Now, imagine that kind of raw, untamed power bubbling right in America's backyard. That's the chilling, yet ultimately transformative story of Mount St. Helens, a picturesque peak in the Pacific Northwest that, on one horrific Sunday morning, delivered a fiery wake-up call to an entire nation. A nation that, frankly, thought it was immune to that kind of geological drama. Picture Washington State in the late 1970s. Mount St. Helens wasn't just a mountain. It was a postcard, a beautifully symmetrical, snow-capped cone, part of the Cascade Range, nestled amidst lush forests, pristine lakes, and abundant wildlife. It was a haven for hikers, campers, fishermen, and loggers, a place of serene natural beauty, where the greatest danger seemed to be a road bear or a poorly navigated canoe. For generations, it had been a quiet, gentle giant, its last minor eruption occurring way back in 1857. It was so peaceful, so seemingly benign, that most people probably thought volcano was just a fancy word for a big hill with pretty snow. Oh, how wrong they were. Then, on March 20th, 1980, the mountain cleared its throat, not with a roar, but with a series of small earthquakes. Subtle at first, easily dismissed, but then they intensified. By March 27th, the mountain began to vent steam and ash. Plumes of smoke rose from its summit, dusting the surrounding landscape. This wasn't just a nuisance. It was a direct, undeniable message from the earth. And unlike ancient civilizations, America had geologists. Scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey, or USGS, arrived quickly, setting up monitoring equipment, listening intently to the mountain's every groan and sigh. What they discovered was chilling. Not only were the earthquakes intensifying, but the north face of the mountain was beginning to bulge. Imagine a massive, seemingly solid rock face, literally expanding outwards by several feet a day, pushed by magma rising relentlessly beneath the surface. It was a giant, visible geological tumor, growing at an alarming rate. Geologists, like the brilliant but ultimately tragic David A. Johnston, began issuing urgent warnings. They knew this wasn't just steam. This was a prelude to something far, far worse. They recommended closing off vast areas around the mountain, evacuating residents, restricting access. They understood the science. They saw the danger, and they screamed it as loudly as they could. But here's where the human element, that tragic blend of defiance, bureaucracy, and economic concern, really played its part. Closing off a popular recreational area, disrupting logging operations, displacing residents. These weren't easy decisions. There was pushback. Local residents, like the famously stubborn Harry Truman, an 83-year-old lodge owner who had lived on the mountain slopes for decades, defiantly refused to leave. "I'm not moving," he famously declared. "This is my home." His defiance, while admirable in its own way, captured the conflicting attitudes, the scientific warnings versus the ingrained human attachment to land, and perhaps a touch of it won't happen to me complacency. Then came the morning of Sunday, May 18th, 1980. A beautiful, clear day. The mountain had been bulging for weeks, releasing steam, causing anxiety. But everyone thought, if it erupted, it would be a vertical blast, straight up, like Vesuvius or Krakatoa. They were wrong. Horrifyingly, fatally wrong. At precisely 8:32 a.m., a magnitude 5.1 earthquake, relatively small in geological terms, struck directly beneath the mountain. But it was just enough. That tremor triggered the largest landslide in recorded history, a colossal chunk of the mountain's bulging north face, literally miles long, sloughing off and roaring down the valley like an unstoppable rocky avalanche. And with the removal of that colossal plug, the pressure inside the volcano was suddenly violently released, not upward but laterally. Mount St. Helens unleashed a devastating lateral blast. Imagine a superheated, supersonic shotgun blast of rock, ash, and volcanic gases, traveling sideways, directly into the valley. It moved at speeds exceeding 300 miles per hour, faster than sound. The sheer force of it was incomprehensible. It instantly flattened 230 square miles of pristine forest, transforming it into a desolate, gray wasteland of splintered trees and charred debris. Think of it like a giant, cosmic hand, sweeping across the landscape, simply pushing everything down. No standing trees, no living things, just an instant, utter obliteration. The destruction continued in waves. Behind the lateral blast came scorching pyroclastic flows, roaring down the slopes, incinerating anything that had miraculously survived. Then, a towering Plinian column of ash miles high erupted vertically from the now cratered summit, turning day into a terrifying, ash-choked night for hundreds of miles. Ash rained down for days, blanketing towns and cities across Washington, Idaho, and Montana. It clogged car engines, grounded airplanes, turned roads into treacherous, gray rivers of grit, and made breathing a painful, wheezing ordeal. The Pacific Northwest, usually so green and vibrant, was now a monochrome landscape of silence and suffocating ash. For those living through it, it was a terrifying, bewildering experience, a direct confrontation with nature's raw, unpredictable fury. The human toll, while far less than, say, Pompeii or Pili, was still tragic. 57 people perished. Many were caught in the blast zone, often ignoring evacuation orders, or simply caught unaware by the lateral nature of the explosion. Harry Truman, the Defiant Lodge owner, was tragically buried under hundreds of feet of debris, his final stand swallowed by the mountain he loved. And then there was David A. Johnston, the brilliant USGS geologist. He was stationed just 6 miles from the summit, monitoring the bulging north face. His final, chilling words, radioed to his colleagues, were Vancouver. Vancouver. This is it. He was instantly consumed by the lateral blast, a stark, heartbreaking symbol of scientific dedication in the face of overwhelming natural power. The aftermath was immense. Millions of dollars were spent on cleanup efforts. Ash had to be removed from roads, buildings, and airports. The immediate landscape was utterly transformed. A massive horseshoe-shaped crater, where a symmetrical peak once stood, lakes filled with debris, rivers choked with mud flows. But out of this devastation came a profound, sobering wake-up call for America. Before St. Helens, volcanic eruptions were seen as a distant, exotic threat, something that happened in Indonesia or Italy, not in the United States. Afterwards, that perception shattered. This was a direct, undeniable reminder that America, too, lives on a geologically active planet with its own simmering giants. The reaction was swift and comprehensive. Mount St. Helens became a real-time laboratory, fundamentally changing volcanology and disaster preparedness in the United States. Monitoring techniques improved dramatically, with new technologies developed to detect seismic activity, ground deformation, and gas emissions. Early warning systems were refined, and evacuation protocols became far more stringent, balancing scientific urgency with public safety. The public, too, gained a newfound, healthy respect for the power of volcanoes, understanding that those beautiful peaks were far from dormant, and that sleepy didn't mean harmless. Today, Mount St. Helens is a national volcanic monument, a place of stark, haunting beauty, where the process of ecological recovery is still vividly on display. You can see the new growth pushing through the ash, the lake slowly clearing, and a new, smaller lava dome slowly building within the crater. It's a living laboratory, a testament to both nature's destructive power and its incredible resilience. And it stands as a permanent reminder of America's fiery wake-up call, a moment when a sleeping giant stretched, yawned, and reminded an entire nation that the earth, even in its most beautiful places, is always, always alive and always, always capable of a truly spectacular tantrum. All right, so we've seen volcanoes that deafen the world, volcanoes that make summers disappear, and volcanoes that simply vaporize entire cities. Pretty destructive, right? But what about a volcano that puts on a colossal, terrifying show, and yet, paradoxically, actually helps cool the entire planet? A destructive force that, in a strange twist of fate, offer humanity a vital scientific lesson. That, my friends, is a curious and ultimately triumphant story of Mount Pinatubo, the Philippine peak that gave Earth a brief, chilling respite. Picture the Philippines, early 1990s. Mount Pinatubo, nestled on the island of Luzon, was a seemingly unremarkable, heavily eroded volcano. Its slopes were lush with rainforests, home to indigenous Ita communities, and completely overshadowed by two sprawling American military installations, Clark Air Base and Subic Bay Naval Base, teeming with thousands of U.S. servicemen and their families. For over 600 years, Pinatubo had been dormant, silent. It was just a picturesque mountain, part of the landscape, completely off humanity's radar. Nobody, absolutely nobody, thought it was a threat. Oh, how quickly that perception would change. The rumbling started subtly in March 1991. Small earthquakes, steam vents appearing on the slopes, minor ash explosions. It was like Pinatubo was stretching, waking up after a very, very long nap. Scientists from the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOLCS, along with a newly arrived team from the U.S. Geological Survey, immediately deployed equipment and began monitoring the restless giant. This was a critical moment. Modern volcanology, with all its fancy gadgets, was about to get its biggest test run, directly against a beast that had slept for centuries. As weeks turned into months, the signs grew more ominous. Seismic activity intensified, indicating magma was steadily rising. Sulfur dioxide emissions spiked dramatically, reaching thousands of tons per day, literally smelling like the devil's workshop. Small, frequent explosions dusted the area with ash. These weren't just scientific readings. They were clear, unmistakable warnings from the Earth itself. And this time, unlike Pompeii or St. Pierre, humanity was listening. Scientists were issuing increasingly urgent warnings, using the growing evidence to push for action, to convince skeptical local authorities and military commanders that this sleepy mountain was about to go very, very loud. Finally, after weeks of escalating tremors and explosions, the colossal main eruption began on June 15, 1991. This was no gentle burp. This was a VEI 6 event, one of the largest and most powerful eruptions of the 20th century. Pinatubo blasted a towering column of ash, gas, and volcanic rock over 25 miles into the sky, punching through the stratosphere and reaching altitudes rarely seen. The plume was so vast it covered an area of thousands of square miles, turning day into a terrifying, suffocating night. Ash rained down for hours, blanketing the landscape, collapsing roofs, and choking rivers. The local devastation was immense, biblical in scale. Clark Air Base, just 10 miles from the summit, was utterly buried under a foot of heavy, wet ash. Hangars collapsed, aircraft were damaged, and the entire base was effectively rendered inoperable. Subic Bay Naval Base further south also suffered significant damage. The ash, mixing with the torrential rains from Typhoon Yunya, which happened to be passing overhead at the exact same time, because when it rains, it pours, literally, created devastating lahars. These fast-moving, cement-like mudflows buried entire towns and villages, sweeping away bridges and roads, turning river valleys into vast, gray, solidified landscapes of destruction. It was a chaotic, terrifying convergence of volcanic fury and tropical storm. Yet, here's the true paradox and the triumph. Despite the immense power of the eruption and the widespread devastation, the human death toll was remarkably low for an event of this magnitude. Around 800 people lost their lives, a tragedy, but far less than the tens of thousands claimed by Vesuvius, Tambora, or Pili. Why the stark difference? Because of science. Because of the early, persistent warnings issued by volcanologists and the painstaking, dangerous efforts to convince skeptical officials to evacuate the surrounding areas. Over 200,000 people were successfully evacuated from the danger zones in the days and weeks leading up to the main blast. This wasn't just a disaster. It was a testament to what humanity could achieve when it listened to the Earth. But Pinatubo's paradoxical impact wasn't just local, like Tambora before it. Pinatubo injected a colossal amount of sulfur dioxide, an estimated 17 million tons, directly into the stratosphere. And once up there, just like we discussed, that sulfur dioxide transformed into billions of tiny, reflective sulfuric acid aerosols. These microscopic mirrors began their silent, global journey, spreading across the Earth and doing what they do best, reflecting incoming sunlight back into space. The result? A measurable, global cooling of our planet. That's the real kicker. A destructive, terrifying eruption, yet it briefly acted as Earth's very own, very aggressive air conditioner. For the next few years, from 1991 to 1993, global temperatures dropped by an average of about 0.5 degrees Celsius, or roughly 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit. This wasn't just a minor blip. It was a significant, observable climatic shift. Scientists watched, fascinated, as this natural experiment unfolded in real time. They studied how the aerosols spread, how they affected weather patterns, and how they influenced the delicate balance of Earth's climate system. It even had some strange, localized effects. While global temperatures dropped, some regions, particularly in the northern hemisphere, experienced warmer than average winters, a complex interaction of atmospheric dynamics and aerosol distribution. Pinatubo's eruption provided an unprecedented, real-world data set for climate scientists. It became a crucial case study, a natural laboratory that allowed researchers to test and refine their climate models to better understand the complex interplay between volcanic activity and global temperatures. It also provided valuable insights into stratospheric chemistry, including temporary ozone depletion, and improved our understanding of how Earth might respond to various atmospheric changes, whether natural or human-induced. This wasn't just a disaster. It was a masterclass in atmospheric science, delivered by a very angry mountain. So, the legacy of Mount Pinatubo is a complex one. It's a story of devastating local destruction, yes, but also a surprising global climatic impact that gave scientists invaluable data. More importantly, it's a powerful testament to the triumph of modern volcanology and early warning systems. It proved that humanity, armed with knowledge and the courage to act, could stand against even the most furious of Earth's tantrums and save countless lives. Pinatubo didn't just cool the planet. It heated up our understanding of how to live with these magnificent, terrifying giants, teaching us that sometimes, even in the midst of chaos, there are profound, life-saving lessons waiting to be unearthed, and that, as we'll see, gives us a very different perspective on the fiery forces that shape our world. All right, so we've seen the raw, unbridled fury of volcanoes from the past, from ancient times when they were angry gods to relatively recent events like St. Helens, which serve as a very loud, very fiery wake-up call. But the chilling truth is, the Earth isn't done rumbling. Around the world, there are roughly 1,350 potentially active volcanoes, and about 20 or so are erupting at any given time. So, how do we watch these giants now? How do modern scientists, armed with all their fancy gadgets and complex algorithms, track these fiery threats? Well, it's a far cry from sacrificing a goat or consulting a grumpy oracle. Gone are the days when a smoking peak was just a sign of divine displeasure. Today we listen, we measure, we sniff, and we do it with an array of sophisticated tools that would make Pliny, the elder's jaw drop. Our first line of defense, our primary way of taking the volcano's pulse, is seismology. Think of it like a giant stethoscope. Scientists use highly sensitive seismographs, buried deep in the ground around a volcano, to detect even the slightest tremors. These aren't just big, obvious earthquakes. These are tiny, often imperceptible rumbles caused by magma pushing and cracking its way through the underground rock. It's like listening for footsteps in a very, very thick wall. A sudden increase in these small, repetitive quakes often indicates that the magma chamber is filling up, expanding, and getting ready for action. It's a crucial early warning sign, often giving us days, sometimes weeks of lead time. But volcanoes don't just rumble, they bulge. As magma pushes up, the ground above it literally deforms, swells, and tilts. To track this subtle yet critical movement, scientists use tilt meters, incredibly precise instruments that can detect changes in ground slope as tiny as a few millimeters over a kilometer. Imagine a super-sensitive level. They also use GPS, not just for directions to the nearest coffee shop, mind you, but for hyper-accurate measurements of ground deformation. GPS receivers, strategically placed on the volcano's flanks, can track changes in elevation and horizontal movement with incredible precision. If the mountain starts to noticeably swell, it's a sure sign that something big is happening deep inside, putting pressure on the surface. Then there's the nose test. Volcanoes don't just emit steam. They release a cocktail of gases, especially sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide. Changes in the type, concentration, and volume of these gases can tell volcanologists a lot about what the magma is doing. A sudden spike in sulfur dioxide, for instance, often indicates that fresh magma is rising close to the surface, bringing its dissolved gases with it. Scientists use special gas detectors, sometimes flown by drones or carried by hand, to sniff out these invisible clues. It's like a doctor smelling your breath for signs of indigestion, only on a much grander and far more dangerous scale. And while we can't see the magma directly, we can measure its heat. Thermal cameras, often mounted on aircraft or satellites, can detect subtle changes in ground temperature, picking up hot spots that indicate magma is nearing the surface or new vents are opening up. It's like seeing the volcano blush before it gets angry. Satellites, those silent sentinels orbiting above us, are increasingly vital. They can monitor ground deformation over vast areas using radar interferometry, track ash plumes as they drift across continents, and even detect changes in gas emissions from orbit. It's a truly global surveillance system, keeping an eye on Earth's fiery hotspots from afar. All this data, from seismic waves to satellite images, flows into volcano observatories located around the world, like the USGS Cascade Volcano Observatory or FIVOLCS in the Philippines. Here, teams of dedicated scientists, often working around the clock, analyze the information, interpret the mountain's mood, and try to predict its next move. Their ultimate goal isn't to stop an eruption, because you can't stop a volcano any more than you can stop the tides, but to provide timely, accurate warnings, to give people precious time to evacuate, to secure their homes, to save lives. Think of it as a constant, complex conversation between humanity and its most unpredictable giants, with lives hanging in the balance. And the success stories like Pinatubo show just how powerful this modern scientific approach can be. In 1991, extensive monitoring allowed scientists to issue clear, unequivocal warnings, leading to the successful evacuation of tens of thousands of people, dramatically reducing the death toll from a truly colossal eruption. It was a triumph of collaboration, communication, and scientific dedication. But it's not perfect. Volcanoes are inherently unpredictable. They can surprise us. They can escalate rapidly. Sometimes, they give very little warning at all. And even with the best science, convincing people to leave their homes, to abandon their livelihoods, is always a monumental challenge, as we saw with Mount St. Helens. So, while we've moved beyond angry gods and desperate sacrifices, the core challenge remains the same, living with Earth's raw power. Modern science hasn't tamed the giants, but it has given us the ability to listen more closely, to understand their moods, and to, hopefully, get out of the way when they decide to unleash their fury. It's a continuous, evolving dance between human ingenuity and geological might, a constant reminder that even in the age of supercomputers, the most profound lessons often come from listening to the ancient rumblings of our living, breathing planet. And learning to live with them, as we'll see, is a delicate art that millions of people around the world practice every single day. All right, so we spent a good bit of time talking about the sheer, unholy destructive power of volcanoes. Cities vanished, climates chilled, sounds heard round the world. You'd think, after witnessing such geological tantrums, humanity would collectively agree, let's build our homes somewhere boring, like a very flat, seismically inactive prairie, perhaps. And yet, millions upon millions of people, today and throughout history, choose to live on the slopes, in the valleys, and even right inside the calderas of some of the most active, most dangerous volcanoes on Earth. It's a paradox, isn't it? A wild gamble with nature's ultimate force. So, what in the world are they thinking? Well, the answer, like so much of history, is complicated, practical, and a little bit stubborn. First, let's talk about the allure. Volcanic soil isn't just dirt, it's a super fertilizer. After an eruption, when that fine ash and pumice break down, they release a bounty of minerals, phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, all the good stuff plants absolutely adore. This makes volcanic slopes incredibly fertile, producing bumper crops that would make a prairie farmer weep with envy. Think about the rich vineyards of Naples, nestled right on Vesuvius' slopes, producing some of Italy's finest wines. Or the incredibly productive coffee plantations in Indonesia, thriving on the very ground that could, at any moment, erupt. It's a trade-off. Immense risk for immense reward. For people relying on agriculture, it's a literal lifeline, a promise of bountiful harvest that other lands just can't deliver. Beyond fertile soil, volcanoes are geological treasure troves. They bring unique minerals to the surface, precious metals, and vast quarries of volcanic rock, perfect for building materials. They also offer geothermal energy. Think Iceland, where virtually the entire country is heated and powered by the steam and hot water harnessed directly from its volcanic underworld. No need for fossil fuels when the Earth itself is your giant, simmering power plant. Japan, New Zealand, the Philippines all utilize geothermal power, a clean, renewable energy source directly gifted by their fiery neighbors. And let's not forget the tourism. The stark, alien beauty of volcanic landscapes, the bubbling mud pots, the steaming vents. They draw millions of visitors every year, creating thriving economies in places that might otherwise be remote and economically challenged. It's a strange kind of beauty, perhaps, but a captivating one. Then there's the deeply human, almost spiritual connection. For many indigenous communities, volcanoes aren't just geological features. They're sacred places, ancestral homes, even living deities. Mount Fuji in Japan isn't just a mountain. It's a spiritual icon, revered for centuries, a source of artistic inspiration and national identity. The Ida people of the Philippines, who lived on Mount Pinatubo, had deep spiritual ties to the land, their entire culture woven into the mountain's fabric. In Hawaii, Pele, the volcano goddess, is not a distant myth, but a living presence, shaping the land and the lives of those who live on it. To abandon such a place isn't just moving. It's abandoning your history, your culture, your very soul. And sometimes, frankly, there's just nowhere else to go. For impoverished communities, particularly in densely populated countries like Indonesia or parts of Central America, the fertile volcanic soil offers the best, or only, chance at survival. The risks are known, perhaps even fatalistically accepted, but the alternative is often starvation on less productive lands or migration to already overcrowded cities. It's a grim choice born of necessity, not folly. You take the immense risk because what else is there? Then there's the human psychology of it all. Complacency is a powerful drug. If a volcano hasn't erupted in living memory, or even in a few hundred years, it's easy to dismiss the scientific warnings, to believe that it won't happen to me, or it won't happen again. This was tragically evident in Pompeii, and more recently, with communities around Mount St. Helens before 1980. People become accustomed to the sleeping giant, viewing it as a benevolent backdrop rather than a ticking time bomb. The sheer stubbornness of human nature, that deep-seated reluctance to abandon what's familiar, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, is a powerful force. So, how do these communities live on the edge? It's a delicate dance between ancient reverence and modern science. In places like Naples, where millions live in the shadow of Vesuvius, there are elaborate, constantly updated evacuation plans, drills, and public education campaigns. Scientists are monitoring the mountain around the clock, listening to its every groan, sniffing its every breath. In Indonesia, Merapi, one of the world's most active and dangerous volcanoes, is constantly monitored by local volcanologists who work hand in hand with village elders to translate scientific warnings into culturally resonant messages. They've developed complex, often ingenious, early warning systems, including traditional watch posts, and even local guards who listen to mountain and provide warnings to their communities. It's a continuous, often desperate, effort to balance life and livelihood with the constant threat of fiery oblivion. In Japan, with its multitude of active volcanoes, strict building codes, extensive monitoring networks, and rapid disaster response systems are commonplace. Education about volcanic hazards starts young. Living with geological instability is part of the national psyche, a constant reminder of nature's power. And in Hawaii, the relationship is different again. With a diffusive, flowing lava, eruptions are often more about watching and diverting, rather than mass evacuation. New land is constantly being created, swallowed by one flow, only to emerge, eventually, from another. It's a dynamic, ever-changing landscape, a vivid illustration of both destruction and creation hand in hand. Ultimately, living on the edge of a volcano is a testament to humanity's resilience, its adaptability, and its perpetual gamble with the powerful forces of nature. It's a choice driven by fertile soil, cultural ties, economic necessity, and sometimes simply a refusal to be intimidated by a mountain. It's a risky business, a constant negotiation, and profound reminder that even in our modern world, with all its technology, some of the most compelling stories of human endurance are still being written, often with the ground rumbling ominously beneath their feet. Because while we can monitor the giants, we can't truly tame them. And sometimes, as we're about to see, the biggest giant of all are still waiting, silently, to be discovered. All right, so we've journeyed through volcanoes that buried cities in a flash, and giants that roared loud enough to be heard across oceans, even dimming the sun for a year. Pretty terrifying, right? But now, let's talk about something that makes even Krakatoa or Tambora seem like a backyard firecracker. Something so utterly colossal, so monumentally destructive, that its eruption could plunge the entire planet into a new ice age, or worse. We're talking about supervolcanoes. Is the Earth just quietly, patiently, hiding its own ticking time bombs, waiting for their moment to reset the planet? You know, when we picture a volcano, we usually think of that classic conical peak, right? Like Mount Fuji or Vesuvius. But a supervolcano? Oh no, these aren't your typical polite, cone-shaped mountains. In fact, you could be standing right on top of one and not even realize it. That's because a supervolcano typically doesn't have a visible cone. Instead, it's characterized by a massive caldera, a vast, sunken depression formed after a colossal eruption empties the magma chamber beneath, causing the ground above to simply collapse inwards. Imagine a gigantic, cosmic divot in the Earth's surface, miles and miles across. It's less a mountain and more a scar, a wound left by an ancient, unimaginable blast. So, what makes a supervolcano super? It's not just about size, though they are enormous. It's about the sheer volume of magma they can erupt. A super eruption is defined as one that ejects more than 1,000 cubic kilometers of material. To put that in perspective, the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption ejected about 1 cubic kilometer. So, a super eruption is roughly 1,000 times bigger. These aren't just big burps. These are planetary scale events capable of unleashing devastation on a scale that makes our previous stories seem almost quaint. Their magma chambers are absolutely titanic, holding unimaginable quantities of molten rock, simmering for hundreds of thousands of years, building pressure, building power. The mechanism is similar to a regular volcano, but on a truly mind-bending scale. Instead of magma finding a narrow pipe to the surface, the entire top layer of the crust above a super-hot plume of magma can literally sag downwards, forming a giant, shallow chamber. As more magma rises, gases build up, and eventually, the immense pressure becomes too much. The ground cracks in a ring shape, and the entire overlying crust can suddenly collapse into the emptying chamber, triggering an eruption that isn't just vertical, but widespread and utterly catastrophic. It's like the planet's crust suddenly giving way, triggering a geological cannon blast on a continental scale. Our planet has witnessed these monstrous events throughout its history. One of the most famous examples is the Toba supervolcano in Sumatra, Indonesia. Around 74,000 years ago, Toba unleashed a VI8 eruption, one of the most powerful known. It blasted so much ash into the atmosphere that it's believed to have triggered a volcanic winter lasting 6 to 10 years, plunging the Earth into a brutal ice age and, according to some theories, dramatically reducing the human population to just a few thousand survivors. Imagine surviving that, living through years of twilight and bitter cold, all because a giant crater had opened up on the other side of the world. It's an almost extinction-level event orchestrated by geology. But you don't have to go to Indonesia to find one. The most famous and perhaps most unnerving supervolcano on Earth lives right beneath our feet in the United States. Yellowstone. Yes, that Yellowstone with its beautiful geysers, hot springs, and bison. All those bubbling mud pots and steaming fumaroles are actually visible signs of a colossal, restless magma chamber lurking just a few miles beneath the surface. Yellowstone is a hot-spot volcano, responsible for 3 truly gargantuan eruptions in its past. One 2.1 million years ago, another 1.3 million years ago, and the last one about 630,000 years ago. Each one left behind a massive caldera, dwarfing anything we've seen in recorded history. And each one was powerful enough to blanket half of North America in thick ash. So, the chilling question always lingers. Is Yellowstone a ticking time bomb? Are we due for another super eruption? Well, the good news, or perhaps the less terrifying news, is that these events are incredibly rare. The recurrence interval for Yellowstone super eruptions is, on average, roughly every 600,000 to 800,000 years. So, technically we're a little overdue based on averages, but averages in geology are like averages in life. They don't guarantee anything. Scientists, using all those fancy monitoring tools we discussed, seismographs, GPS, gas sniffers, keep a very, very close eye on Yellowstone. They detect ground deformation, changes in geyser activity and gas emissions. So far, while it's certainly active and restless, there are no immediate signs of an impending super eruption. It's like a giant sleeping beast. It snores and twitches, but hasn't yet woken up with a really angry growl. But imagine, just for a moment, if it did. The consequences would be apocalyptic, on a scale we've never witnessed as a global civilization. A massive eruption would blast ash and rock miles into the atmosphere, potentially covering thousands of square miles of the central and western United States in feet of ash, collapsing roofs, paralyzing transportation, and rendering vast areas uninhabitable. Rivers would be choked, water supplies contaminated, and agriculture would simply cease in enormous swaths of the country. Beyond that, the massive injection of sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere would trigger a prolonged, devastating volcanic winter. Global temperatures would plummet for years, sunlight would be severely dimmed, and widespread crop failures across the planet would lead to global famine, mass migrations, and profound societal collapse. It wouldn't just be a regional disaster. It would be a civilization-altering event, a true reset button for humanity. Of course, the likelihood of such an event happening in our lifetimes is astronomically small. Geologists often compare it to being hit by a meteorite. It's possible, but not something to lose sleep over every night. But the existence of supervolcanoes, these hidden giants beneath our feet, serves as a powerful, humbling reminder of Earth's immense, untamed power. They are a testament to the planet's ability to reshape itself on timescales that dwarf human history, reminding us that even with all our technological prowess, we are still ultimately living on a dynamic, living world capable of tantrums that can chill an entire planet. And yet, for all their terrifying power, volcanoes, even the super ones, are part of a larger, astonishing story, one that even has its own surprising upsides, as we're about to explore. All right, so for the past little while, we've been neck-deep in volcanic destruction, haven't we? Cities buried, climates chilled, sounds heard round the world, even an occasional supervolcano giving us existential dread. And for good reason. These fiery giants are immensely powerful, unpredictable, and capable of erasing our best-laid plans. But here's the cosmic paradox, the strange counterintuitive truth. For all their terrifying fury, volcanoes are also nature's ultimate builders. They're Earth's grand furnace, constantly creating, enriching, and sustaining life in ways we often take for granted. So, what exactly are the unexpected upsides of all that volcanic fire? First, and perhaps most famously, let's talk about that incredibly fertile soil. You know, the very ground that Vesuvius sits on, or the slopes of Mount Pelee before its tragic outburst. That isn't just dirt, it's a geological miracle. Volcanic ash and weathered lava are absolutely packed with essential minerals. Phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, magnesium, all the good stuff plants absolutely adore. When those fine particles break down, they release a bounty of nutrients that ordinary soil can only dream of. That's why you find incredibly productive agricultural regions nestled right up against active volcanoes. The vineyards of Italy, the coffee plantations of Indonesia and Central America, the rice paddies of the Philippines. Farmers take immense risks, yes, but for the promise of harvest so rich, so abundant, it simply outweighs the constant, simmering threat. It's the ultimate high-risk, high-reward farming strategy. Then there's the power, the sheer raw energy that these deep earth processes generate. We're talking about geothermal energy. Imagine tapping directly into the Earth's own colossal internal furnace. In places like Iceland, New Zealand, Japan, and parts of the United States, engineers harness the superheated steam and hot water from volcanic activity to generate electricity, heat homes, and even warm greenhouses. Iceland, for instance, powers almost its entire country with clean, renewable geothermal energy, effectively turning volcanic fire into light, warmth, and industry. No need for fossil fuels when the very ground beneath your feet is a giant, simmering power plant. It's a remarkable quiet revolution, fueled by the very forces that once inspired ancient fears. But volcanoes aren't just about fertile soil and clean energy. They're also geological treasure chests. As magma rises from deep within the earth, it often brings with it valuable minerals and metals that would otherwise remain inaccessible. Think gold, silver, copper, lead, zinc, and even diamonds, all formed or brought closer to the surface through ancient or ongoing volcanic activity. Vast mineral deposits around the world owe their existence to past volcanic processes. Even unique building materials like pumice, that lightweight, porous rock that rained down on Pompeii, or obsidian, volcanic glass used for tools and weapons since ancient times, are direct gifts from Earth's fiery interior. They literally bring the riches to the surface, making these regions economically vibrant long after the ash is settled. And let's not forget the grandest act of creation, new land formation. While explosive eruptions might tear an island apart, effusive, flowing lava, like what you see in Hawaii, is constantly adding new coastline, expanding islands, and creating brand new land masses. Imagine seeing raw, molten rock pour into the ocean, solidify, and then, over time, weather and cool, slowly become the foundation for new ecosystems, new beaches, new homes. It's literally watching the earth grow, expand, and reshape itself one fiery flow at a time. Whole islands, like the Big Island of Hawaii, are built layer by layer from countless eruptions, a continuous process of destruction and rebirth. Beyond the obvious, there are subtler upsides. Volcanic landscapes, with their stark, alien beauty, their bubbling mud pots, steaming fumaroles, and dramatic peaks, are powerful magnets for tourism. They draw millions of visitors every year, creating thriving local economies, supporting guides, hotels, and local businesses in areas that might otherwise be remote and struggling. They're natural laboratories, too, constantly teaching scientists invaluable lessons about Earth's processes, atmospheric chemistry, and the resilience of life in extreme environments. Think of the unique extremophile bacteria found in volcanic hot springs, thriving in conditions that would instantly kill most other life forms, hinting at the very origins of life on Earth. A living, breathing, fiery textbook, constantly updating itself. Ultimately, volcanoes are not just agents of destruction. They are fundamental architects of our planet. They shape continents, enrich soil, create new land, and provide a bounty of resources that fuel our civilizations. They're a constant, visceral reminder that Earth is a dynamic, living world, constantly churning, constantly evolving, constantly reshaping itself. And sometimes, in that terrifying, beautiful, fiery process, they gift us with the very ingredients essential for life to flourish. It's a strange, magnificent dance between chaos and creation, a constant reminder that even nature's most violent acts are often part of a grander, more astonishing, and endlessly fascinating plan. A plan that, as we'll see, isn't limited to just our planet. Alright, so we've journeyed through Earth's most dramatic volcanic tantrums, from cities vanished in fire to global climates chilled by ash. Pretty wild, right? But here's a mind-bending thought. Earth isn't special. Volcanoes, in all their fiery, majestic, and destructive glory, aren't unique to our little blue marble. Oh no, the cosmos is full of them. From scorching hot worlds cloaked in thick atmospheres, to frigid, distant moons spewing ice instead of molten rock, the universe is a surprisingly violent, volcanically active place. So, let's go beyond our world for a moment and see what kind of geological fireworks are happening out there across the vast, cold stretches of space. First stop, Venus. Imagine a planet that's basically Earth's evil twin. It's roughly the same size, but its surface is a hellish landscape of extreme heat, hot enough to melt lead and crushing atmospheric pressure, all shrouded in a thick, toxic blanket of sulfuric acid clouds. And under those clouds, volcanoes, Lots of them. Venus boasts more volcanoes than any other planet in our solar system, with hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions, scattered across its surface. We're talking vast, sprawling lava flows, some extending for hundreds of miles, creating immense plains. There are also peculiar pancake domes, flat, circular volcanic structures that look exactly like giant cosmic pancakes, formed by extremely viscous lava oozing out and then solidifying. For a long time, scientists thought Venus's volcanism was ancient history, but recent evidence, like changes in sulfur dioxide levels in its atmosphere, suggests that, in some places, Venus might still be geologically active today. Imagine a volcano erupting on Venus. Not just lava, but a plume of superheated, toxic gases, all under a sky of perpetual acid rain. Not exactly a vacation spot, is it? Next up, our celestial neighbor, Mars. You might think of Mars as a cold, dusty, red desert, perhaps a bit boring geologically, but scratch beneath that rusty surface, and you'll find a planet with a truly epic volcanic past. Mars is home to the largest volcano in our entire solar system, Olympus Mons. This isn't just a big mountain. It's a colossal shield volcano so massive that it literally dwarfs anything on Earth. Imagine a mountain the size of Arizona, towering nearly 16 miles high. That's almost 3 times the height of Mount Everest. Its base is so wide, you couldn't see the entire volcano from its summit due to the curvature of the planet. Olympus Mons and its smaller Martian siblings are prime examples of effusive volcanism, built up over billions of years by countless slow, gentle lava flows. The sheer scale suggests that Mars once had a very active, very different interior. Today, Mars is largely considered volcanically inactive, a relic of a fiery past. But studying these extinct Martian giants helps us understand how planets form and evolve, and the implications for whether Mars once had a thicker atmosphere or even liquid water on its surface. But if you want to talk about true volcanic craziness, the undisputed champion, the heavyweight title holder for volcanic activity in our solar system, is Io, not a planet, but one of Jupiter's 4 largest moons. Io is a cosmic nightmare. It's literally being ripped apart by gravity. Jupiter, the solar system's colossal gas giant, exerts immense tidal forces on Io, constantly squeezing and stretching it. Imagine a celestial tug-of-war, perpetually kneading the moon's interior. This constant flexing generates enormous amounts of internal heat, keeping Io's interior molten. The result? Io is the most volcanically active body we know of anywhere. It's covered in hundreds of active volcanoes, constantly erupting, spewing plumes of sulfur and sulfur dioxide hundreds of miles into space. The surface of Io is constantly being resurfaced by these eruptions, a bizarre, multicolored landscape of reds, oranges, and yellows, where lava flows are perpetually remaking the terrain. No impact craters here. They get buried almost as soon as they form. It's a truly alien world, a testament to what happens when gravity becomes a geological engine, turning a moon into a churning infernal kaleidoscope. And then, things get really weird, because volcanism isn't just about molten rock. Head out to the frigid, distant reaches of our solar system, and you find a different kind of eruption, cryovolcanism or ice volcanoes. Instead of spewing scorching hot lava, these mysterious geological features erupt volatiles like water, ammonia, and methane, often in slushy, cold mixtures. Think of it like a giant, cosmic slushy machine. On Neptune's moon Triton, geysers of nitrogen ice erupt into space. On Ceres, the dwarf planet in the asteroid belt, scientists have found evidence of cryovolcanoes that push salty mud and ice onto the surface. Even Saturn's moon Enceladus has its famous tiger stripes, fissures that spew plumes of water vapor and ice particles from a subsurface ocean, a process that might even create the earring around Saturn itself. And Titan, Saturn's largest moon, with its methane lakes and rivers, is believed to have cryovolcanoes that erupt liquid methane and water ice. Studying these icy eruptions helps us understand the internal structures of these frozen worlds, and the potential for subsurface oceans where, just perhaps, life might exist. So, what does all this extraterrestrial fire and ice tell us? Well, for one, it proves that volcanism is a fundamental process in planetary evolution. It's how planets release internal heat, how they build their surfaces, and how they shape their atmospheres. Studying these alien volcanoes helps us understand our own Earth better, its fiery past, its restless present, and its potential future. It teaches us about the diverse ways geological activity can manifest, from scorching rock flows to icy geysers, and it expands our understanding of where the ingredient for life might exist beyond Earth, hinting at the complex chemical processes driven by internal heat on even the most unlikely of worlds. From the scorching lava plains of Venus to the colossal, ancient peaks of Mars, and from the infernal, sulphurous landscape of Io to the icy plumes of Enceladus, the universe is constantly rumbling, shifting, and erupting. It's a breathtaking reminder of the dynamic, living nature of celestial bodies, far beyond our familiar blue marble. And it makes you wonder, if the cosmos is so full of these powerful, unpredictable forces, what does that mean for our own planet? What kind of fiery future awaits us, right here on Earth? That, my friends, is the final, burning question we'll grapple with next, as we look ahead to the very future of fire. Alright, so we've journeyed through millennia of fire and fury, from ancient gods to global chillers, from cities flash vaporized to quiet hum of modern monitoring stations. We've seen Earth's heart beat in terrifying, yet often beautiful, ways. But here's the inescapable truth. The story isn't over, not by a long shot. Our planet is a living, breathing, constantly shifting entity, and its fiery heart isn't going to quiet down just because we finished our video. So, what's next for Earth's fiery heart? What does the future fire hold for us? Its occasionally nervous, occasionally complacent inhabitants. The first, most certain answer is more of the same in geological terms. Volcanoes aren't disappearing. They're a fundamental part of our planet's engine, constantly shaping continents, enriching soils, and releasing heat and gases from deep within. The ring of fire will continue to simmer. The hot spots will keep burning their way through plates, and new, smaller cones will undoubtedly emerge, while old, familiar giants will continue their restless sleep or awaken with a roar. That's just how Earth works. And frankly, it's a good thing, a sign of a healthy, active planet. A silent planet would be a dead one. What has changed dramatically is our ability to listen. Our global network of seismographs, GPS receivers, gas sniffers, and thermal cameras is constantly taking the pulse of these giants. We're getting better, significantly better, at understanding their moods, at detecting the subtle tremors, the slight bulges, the telltale gas changes that often precede an eruption. Pinatubo was a monumental triumph of this modern volcanology, showing what timely warnings and mass evacuations can achieve. Scientists around the world, from USGS to PHYVLX, are literally saving lives by listening to the Earth's groans and sighs. But here's the challenge. Predicting eruptions is still an art as much as a science. It's not like predicting the weather, which is already notoriously difficult. Volcanoes are complex, individualistic entities. One might give weeks of clear warnings, like St. Helens or Pinatubo, allowing for evacuations and preparedness. Another might escalate rapidly, like Mount Vesuvius, giving mere hours or even less for escape. And some, the truly sneaky ones, might erupt with very little overt warning at all. It's a constant, high-stakes poker game with nature, and she holds all the cards. We're just trying to read her tells. So, who are the immediate contenders, the ones volcanologists are watching with particular intensity? Well, there's Vesuvius, still looming over millions in Naples, a ticking demographic time bomb. Merapi in Indonesia is one of the most active and dangerous, surrounded by densely populated areas. Sakurajima in Japan is constantly erupting, a daily reminder of its power. And then, of course, there's Yellowstone, the supervolcano, still twitching in its long geological sleep. While a supereruption remains an incredibly rare, long-odds event, the sheer scale of its potential impact means it can never be entirely dismissed. It's the ultimate black swan event of the geological world. And what about human ingenuity? Can we, in the future, do more than just listen and evacuate? The idea of geoengineering, or deliberately intervening with volcanic activity, sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but some scientists are already pondering it. Could we, theoretically, relieve pressure from a magma chamber through controlled drilling? It's a hugely controversial, incredibly risky idea. fraught with unimaginable dangers if something goes wrong. Imagine trying to unclog a geological giant. One wrong move could trigger the very disaster you're trying to prevent. The current consensus is that intervention is far too dangerous and probably impossible with our current technology. However, the atmospheric impact of volcanoes, those global chillers we discussed, have also sparked a strange kind of speculation. If colossal eruptions can cool the planet by injecting aerosols into the stratosphere, could humanity, facing climate change, deliberately do something similar? This is a concept of solar radiation management, or SRMs, where aerosols, perhaps sulfur-based, will be intentionally injected into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight and cool the Earth. It's a truly audacious, terrifyingly complex idea, with unknown side effects, governance nightmares, and the potential to disrupt global weather patterns in unpredictable ways. A last-ditch, desperate gamble born from the very phenomena we've been studying in this video. It's a reminder that nature, even in its most destructive acts, sometimes gives us strange, paradoxical lessons. Ultimately, the future of fire on Earth isn't about stopping it. It's about living with it. Humanity, in its stubborn, resilient way, will continue to build on fertile volcanic soils, to harness geothermal energy, and to stare in awe at these magnificent, terrifying expressions of our planet's power. Our knowledge will continue to grow, our monitor will become even more sophisticated, and our ability to issue timely warnings will improve. But the fundamental relationship remains the same. We are small, occasionally clever, but ultimately at the mercy of a dynamic, living world. So, as we bring our journey to a close, remember this. The Earth's fiery heart isn't just a relic of the past. It's a pulsating, evolving force that continues to shape our present and will undoubtedly define our future. It reminds us that our planet is full of wonders, both beautiful and terrifying, that demand our respect, our study, and occasionally our very swift, very well-organized retreat. The rumbling isn't going to stop, and frankly, we wouldn't want it to, because in that deep, ancient hum lies the very lifeblood of our world, a constant, fiery reminder that we are all, forever, living on the edge of something truly magnificent.